What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as an Uchiha and Jinchuriki of TOBIRAMA? Part 3. If you enjoy this type of content, please violently chidori the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the Uchiha Jinchuriki of TOBIRAMA saga. Sarutobi Hiruzen fell from the sky. When he appeared on the scene, Shimura Danzo, who had put on a confident smile again, froze in an instant. But what's interesting is that the Root, who received the order from Shimura Danzo, still surrounded Kazuki and Sarutobi Hiruzen, as if they didn't know the Hokage. "Hiruzen, why are you here?" Shimura Danzo hurriedly signaled the Root to stop the action, and then the villain complained first. "This Uchiha kid is too dangerous. I just want to talk to him, but he violently confronted me." Threatening the village's high-level officials with force, Hiruzen, you also know how bad this is, right? Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Shimura Danzo expressionlessly, and then looked at Kazuki. Although Kazuki's punch knocked Shimura Danzo down, it did not leave any external injuries, so now he looks unscathed, and even has a rosy complexion. But Kazuki, on the other hand, not only has a pale face, but also has dried blood at the corners of his mouth, and even scratches under his eyelids. Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart trembled. How could this be a violent confrontation with Shimura Danzo? This is clearly his attempt to kidnap someone and take his eyes away, but it just failed. "Kazuki, are you okay?" Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned and asked softly. "With me here, you are absolutely safe, don't worry." "Uncle Hiruzen, you came at the right time, I'm fine." Kazuki forced a smile and said weakly. Sarutobi Hiruzen nodded distressedly, feeling a little scared, but fortunately he rushed here as soon as he found something unusual. In recent days, his youngest son Sarutobi Asuma has become a different person. He treated his father with much more respect, which made him feel very comfortable, and he seemed to have opened up his mind in ninjutsu. At this age, he has mastered the profound changes in the nature of fire-attributed chakra, which can be regarded as a young genius. And all of this is closely related to Kazuki. No matter what Asuma does, he will mention Kazuki, and his words are all about his expectation of becoming a partner with Kazuki in the future. If Shimura Danzo destroys Kazuki, Sarutobi Hiruzen dare not think about how Asuma will look at him as a father, and how he will think about Konoha and the Will of Fire. He promised Asuma and Kazuki that he would deal with the darkness of the village. And the result would be that the warrior who discovered that darkness would be eliminated sooner? If it really develops like this, Sarutobi Hiruzen feels that he will probably lose a son, and also lose a genius Uchiha boy who respects him very much. Not only Asuma, but Sarutobi Hiruzen also gradually began to like Kazuki. After all, Kazuki respected him and deeply understood the Will of Fire. Not only had he helped Asuma, but he also knew how to handle human relations. When Sarutobi Hiruzen recalled the scene where Kazuki called him Uncle Hiruzen and lit a cigarette for him, there was a warm current in Sarutobi Hiruzen's heart. So the Hokage's anger was already kindled. But Shimura Danzo didn't seem to realize this problem. He stared at the weak Kazuki and said in a cold tone, "This brat has learned a secret technique that allows him to increase his power several times over in a short period of time. I think this is extremely dangerous for the village. We must investigate it thoroughly. Hiruzen, I know he is Kagami's descendant, so let me take him to the Root. I will train him properly so that he becomes a sharp tool for Konoha." Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned and took a deep breath. "Go on, Danzo." After getting Sarutobi Hiruzen's affirmation, Shimura Danzo's smile became ferocious. "Very good, Hiruzen. Have you also seen the darkness and strangeness hidden in this kid's heart? He is afraid of me. I promised him to take him as a disciple, but he refused. That doesn't make sense. How could a brat from the Uchiha clan refuse an invitation from the Hokage's assistant? He must have unspeakable secrets that he's afraid I'll find out." Danzo spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he had the situation under control, and from time to time, he cast threatening glances at Kazuki. Sarutobi Hiruzen's face became darker and darker. Hiruzen glanced at the root members that Kazuki had knocked down. None of them had received any fatal injuries. They were just unconscious, breathing softly. Look at Kazuki. He used secret techniques to resist your pursuit, but he was still so restrained that he couldn't bear to hurt the shinobi of the village. Mastering explosive secret techniques means being dangerous to the village? What kind of logic is this? Don't you have any of them yourself? If you don't trust excellent juniors, where is the will of fire in your heart, Danzo? As for why Kazuki rejected you, of course it's because I, the Hokage, took care of the juniors of the village and the descendants of my friends one step faster than you did. Do you have the right to put the blame on me? Sarutobi Hiruzen sneered and was about to walk toward Shimura Danzo but was gently grabbed by Kazuki's sleeve. With a pale face, Kazuki shook his head slowly and said in a hoarse voice, Uncle Hiruzen, I think this is probably a misunderstanding. Assistant Danzo and you are both important Konoha high-level officials. There is no need to conflict over the trivial matters of a ninja school student like me. Then, Kazuki gave a weak smile towards Danzo. Assistant Danzo, if you are interested in Tobirama-sama's ninjutsu, you can send someone to inform me, and I will lend you my grandfather's scrolls. I like to share ninjutsu with shinobi from the village, whether it's the Uchiha clan's fire release or the medical ninjutsu that I'm so passionate about. I want more Konoha ninja to learn them so they can become stronger. As he spoke, Kazuki concentrated chakra into his palm, displaying the Senju clan's chakra-enhanced strength. Asuma and I have agreed to study the similarities between chakra control and chakra-enhanced strength tomorrow. We plan to write a paper on ninjutsu that could help more Konoha shinobi master this type of taijutsu. Uncle Hiruzen, if we accomplish something, consider Asuma and I as completing a mission. We've agreed that if we get a reward, we'll use it to eat barbecue together. Sarutobi Hiruzen's breathing stagnated. No wonder Asuma has been reading the classics of chakra control crazily recently, looking thirsty for knowledge. If Asuma doesn't see Kazuki tomorrow. Sarutobi Hiruzen, moved, patted Kazuki on the shoulder and said in a low voice, Go back and rest. Asuma will be waiting for you tomorrow, Kazuki. Kazuki nodded, and even said goodbye to Shimura Danzo, and walked towards the Uchiha clan. At this moment, even Shimura Danzo was confused. He couldn't tell whether Kazuki was an idiot with an extremely pure will of fire or a cunning Uchiha brat. But Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't give him too much time to think. After Kazuki was no longer on the scene, Uncle Hiruzen's personality did not need to be maintained, and the majestic third Hokage appeared instead. Shimura Danzo stared at Kazuki's departing back, his eyes full of unwillingness. He really liked Kazuki more and more. He had almost been kidnapped by force, and yet he spoke well of them? This extremely stupid Uchiha, with such a talent for combat, was just suitable for being brainwashed by Shimura Danzo, and became the best blade for him to ascend to the top of the Hokage position. But in a flash, Sarutobi Hiruzen walked in front of him without saying a word, looking at him expressionlessly. Shimura Danzo's heart trembled. Although Shimura Danzo was one size bigger than Sarutobi Hiruzen in height and body shape, but with his growth experience from childhood to adulthood and his current status, the Hokage assistant will never be able to raise his head in front of the Hokage. Danzo, do you have anything else to say? Sarutobi Hiruzen narrowed his eyes and said in a cold tone, In order to control Kazuki, you mobilize the roots that protect the village to set up a barrier to block my perception. As the assistant Hokage, are you so afraid that I, the Hokage, will see you do things? How many things are you hiding from me, from the village, from the will of fire that Tobirama-sensei taught us? Shimura Danzo frowned and retorted, Hiruzen, I just want to prevent unrest in the village. You also saw that Uchiha Kazuki is not a ninja who follows the orders of the village without compromise. He will even refuse the orders of me, the assistant Hokage. I still suggest that although he is the descendant of Kagami, he should not be taken lightly. Leave him to me. I promise you, Hiruzen, I will not roughly train him to be a tool of the roots, but seriously cultivate the next Kagami. Sarutobi Hiruzen sneered in his heart. You want to train Kazuki to be the second Kagami? Do you mean that you are a great ninja like Tobirama-sensei? Or you are the Hokage of Konoha? Is it your turn to train Kazuki? He's mine. Only I, the Hokage, have any right over him. Sarutobi Hiruzen rudely interrupted Shimura Danzo's chatter and pointed at him sternly. Kazuki's whereabouts and future are directly connected to me, the Hokage, and it is not your turn as the Hokage's assistant to make decisions. You have secretly used the root to hide information from me, You have seriously injured one of the most talented shinobi in the village. In the past, when you blackmailed the shinobi of the Yamanaka and Aburame clans, at least you negotiated with them in words, and I, the Hokage, could also help you appease them a little in the name of expanding the power of the root to defend Konoha. Nowadays, you are becoming more and more arbitrary, and you are simply an asshole. Danzo, you are too presumptuous. Shimura Danzo's eyes went dark. In fact, he didn't hear what Sarutobi Hiruzen said later. Just hearing, I am the Hokage, and you the Hokage's assistant, his blood pressure began to rise. It's like this again. It's always like this. The title of Hokage assistant is only 2 words more than Hokage, but it is a chasm that cannot be overcome no matter how hard you try. With just 1 word from Sarutobi Hiruzen, Shimura Danzo has no ability to resist, and even loses his position. This is the Hokage, the only existence of Konoha. Why, Hiruzen? Shimura Danzo's eyes were full of anger, and he said viciously, You blame me for a kid from the Uchiha clan. Have you forgotten how Tobirama-sensei views the Uchiha clan? Sarutobi Hiruzen sneered. Danzo, this is why I am the Hokage. Tobirama-sama can cultivate shinobi like Kagami, not by brainwashing and curse seals in the root, but by the will of fire that gathers people's hearts. The root is buried in the darkness. Do what you should do, and don't think about competing with the leaf for nutrition. Shimura Danzo's eyes suddenly became dangerous. He doesn't want to be a root for life. He wants to climb to the top step by step and be the shining leaf. But Hiruzen did not fear him. In fact, he added something that made Danzo's heart shudder. You and Orochimaru are doing human experiments secretly. Do you think I don't know? Danzo, I've been waiting for you to confess to me, but now it seems that you just want to hide it from me. Danzo's dangerous look instantly changed to one of uncertainty. Sarutobi Hiruzen actually knows his roots so well. It's only been a few days, and Kino has just awakened his talent for wood release, and Sarutobi Hiruzen has arrived at the door? For a while, Shimura Danzo didn't even trust the roots. The root was surely infiltrated by Hiruzen. He must have spies among them. Remove you from your position as assistant to the Hokage and confine yourself to your home for 3 months. Reflect on it, Danzo. Sarutobi Hiruzen coldly issued an order to Danzo and waved his hand. In an instant, countless black shadows appeared from all directions, half kneeling in front of the Hokage. The ANBU is directly under the orders of the Hokage. And among them, one of the most powerful shinobi in Konoha today, Hatake Tsukumo. Tsukumo, you lead the team to thoroughly investigate the root. Sarutobi Hiruzen said coldly. The members of the root must also be checked from inside to outside, and don't worry about Orochimaru if you meet him. The darkness in the village cannot grow without restraint. Shimura Danzo immediately clenched his teeth. Not only did this mean the loss of a shinobi with wood release abilities, but the root could also be severely weakened. Tsukumo nodded, not even looking at Danzo, and turned to leave quickly. Hatake Tsukumo. Shimura Danzo stared at his back. He had already hated this person. Not only was he one of the obstacles to his ascension to the top of the Hokage position, but he was also Sarutobi Hiruzen's loyal dog. If he couldn't face Hiruzen directly, he would cut off his wings first. It's no good for the village to treat the root like this. Shimura Danzo was still making his last effort, and roared angrily, Hiruzen, you will regret it. Danzo, I am the Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen waved his hand and responded very smoothly. This conversation has been played out countless times in the decades that the two have worked together. Shimura Danzo turned around and left, furious. But after taking 2 steps, he seemed to feel something was wrong. This is not the Hokage's office. There is no door for him to slam. If he doesn't slam something, he really can't vent the suppressed anger in his heart. Bang. So Shimura Danzo slammed his crutches to the ground, snorted as if in protest, and left quickly. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Shimura Danzo, who was in a bad mood, but shook his head and chuckled. You are still so naive, Danzo. If you don't make any progress, how can you surpass me? However, you have reminded me that I should think of a suitable teacher for Asuma and Kazuki. Asuma has suggested Tsunade to me. It is not a bad choice, but I need to consider it carefully. Sarutobi Hiruzen pondered. Choosing Asuma and Kazuki's teacher, in the context of the tradition of Hokage and his disciples, was not an easy task. Konoha. Root. Tsukumo led the group of ANBU, advancing at the front while inspecting every corner of the root base. The gloomy and terrifying root is the most mysterious building and area in Konoha. Ordinary jonin are reluctant to get too close to here, so as not to attract the attention of Shimura Danzo and cause unnecessary disasters. But tonight, Konoha White Fang, who received the order of Sarutobi Hiruzen, led the ANBU to tear open this mysterious veil. The so-called root is nothing more than a detachment of the ANBU. It's just that under the indulgence of Shimura Danzo, the root used the power of the group to abuse individuals, and established his personal prestige with this behavior, which is essentially bullying. But the root shinobi who still resisted were unable to stop the advance of the squad led by Tsukumo. So the secret of the root was completely torn open. A laboratory door opened, and Orochimaru slowly walked out, his eyes narrowed as he watched Tsukumo. Frowning, he thought to himself, Danzo. Did he inadvertently anger the old man? How could they send Tsukumo to storm the root with such force? This is serious. It's troublesome. It's not easy for me to deal with this guy. Hatake Tsukumo stood in front with an expressionless face. Sarutobi Hiruzen gave him a very clear order. Don't worry if you meet Orochimaru. Orochimaru, with his arms crossed, looked at the ANBU who had already searched every corner of the root, and said in a low voice, Everyone, this is my laboratory. There is no violation. Tsukumo, what do you want to find? Maybe you can ask me. Orochimaru, I have received orders from the third Hokage to inspect the entire route. Step aside. Orochimaru looked at Tsukumo with dangerous eyes and, sticking out his tongue, licked his lips. In the laboratory behind him, there is not only a full set of experimental data on Hashirama's cells, but also the only successful degradation product at present, Root Kino, the first shinobi with wood release created by Konoha, that is, the future Yamato. Due to the appearance of Kazuki, Shimura Danzo concluded that he would get a better Sharingan, so he did not hide Yamato from Orochimaru, but took him out as a material for researching a stronger wood release. Tsukumo, I am the disciple of the third Hokage. I only follow the orders of the Hokage. Hatake Tsukumo confronted Orochimaru, not giving him any face at all. Orochimaru's face was a little embarrassed, and his pupils stood up like snakes. Remember this, Tsukumo. Don't forget what you've done today. Although he was a little resentful in his heart, Orochimaru still got out of the way very sincerely. What else could he do? Hatake Tsukumo led a large group of ANBU, and still searched under the order of the Hokage. Orochimaru stared at the ANBU swarming in and shook his head. If Kino and Hashirama's cells, even if these seemingly precious research materials are lost, Orochimaru is not sad. In recent research, Orochimaru discovered that although wood release is indeed a very powerful Kekkei Genkai, it is not much stronger than other Kekkei Genkai in the shinobi world. The biggest feature is that it has a special attack effect on the tailed beasts. But in today's Konoha, there is still the Uzumaki clan's adamantine sealing chains, which is no worse than the wood release's effect against tailed beasts. And if it is to fight against shinobi, wood release does not have too many advantages. Konoha has always wanted to reproduce the power of Senju Hashirama by reproducing wood release. But Orochimaru believes the reason why Senju Hashirama is so powerful is because of his chakra, physique, sage mode, and other reasons. Wood release is just one of the links, not the fundamental decisive factor. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and let the ANBU search through his experimental data and take Kino away. Wood release is no longer what he needs. Old man, do you know what I did in the root? Hatake Tsukumo's attitude is not normal. War is so ruthless, the human body is so fragile, and the relationship between master and apprentice is the same. If you want to transcend the constraints of this world, you still need immortality. Orochimaru has already felt that he is drifting away from Sarutobi Hiruzen and Konoha. For Orochimaru, who wants to pursue the path of immortality, he gradually regards this bond as a constraint and a burden. And in the Hokage residence, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who received the report from Hatake Tsukumo, also felt the same as his beloved disciple Orochimaru. The one who was once his most promising disciple had now become too entangled with Danzo, and was beginning to lose his sense of morality, not even caring to maintain the appearance of the will of fire. Originally, among Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya, Sarutobi Hiruzen was most optimistic about Orochimaru. He is calm and gifted. Whether it is his personal ability in combat, his command ability on the battlefield, or his ability to manage the village, he is top-notch. But the problem is that Orochimaru's heart is not on the same line with Sarutobi Hiruzen. So the stronger his ability is, the more troubled the third Hokage is. Tsukumo, take this child to the ANBU to train, cancel the name of Kino, let him forget everything in the route, and live in Konoha under the name of Yamato in the future. I'll do it right away, Hokage-sama. After Hatake Tsukumo left, Sarutobi Hiruzen once again thought about the teacher of Asuma and Kazuki. Obviously, after the incident in the route, Orochimaru was no longer within his consideration. So the remaining options are only Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Jiraiya's apprentice Namake's Minato. Minato's quality and skill are very good, but the problem is that Kazuki's skill is so outstanding, and Minato is still very young. The current Namake's Minato has just come of age and is not the yellow flash that made a name for himself in the Third World War. When choosing teachers for Kazuki and Asuma, Sarutobi Hiruzen selfishly thought about the status problem brought by seniority. Then there are only Tsunade and Jiraiya. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. These two apprentices are both a headache. One was heartbroken by the war and was on the verge of self-abandonment. He had not practiced seriously for a long time. The other was trapped by the toad, and kept shouting words like the son of prophecy that people couldn't understand. He went to Mount Mayaboku 2 days ago and hasn't come back yet. Let's wait for Jiraiya to come back and talk to him first. Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head. These disciples really made him worry. But thinking of Kazuki and Asuma, the Hokage smiled from the bottom of his heart again. What good kids. They haven't even graduated from the ninja school yet, but they have worked together to find the black material of the root and dug out the wood-release ninja hidden in the root. Sarutobi Hiruzen hummed a little song from the Sengoku period and read the documents leisurely. And at Kazuki's house, his master, Senju Tobirama, looked particularly serious and was negotiating with Kazuki. Kazuki brat, tell me why you can bear my power. Senju Tobirama questioned Kazuki in a deep voice. In his opinion, Kazuki should have used some secret technique to imprison his soul and regarded him as a tailed beast. This is not simple. The soul is a complex thing, even for Tobirama, who had barely scratched the surface of its nature. If it were as easy as summoning a soul to draw out its power, that would be terrifying. However, Senju Tobirama did not think that Kazuki had reached such a height. At present, his power is controlled by himself and can be taken back by his subjective consciousness. Still, Tobirama knew he had to unravel the mystery behind this. Fortunately, he was sealed in Kazuki's body. With his wisdom and calmness, Senju Tobirama thought that he would not be fooled by the evil Uchiha brat. If his elder brother Senju Hashirama was sealed here, it would be all over. In Senju Tobirama's opinion, the simple elder brother would be fooled by Kazuki and lose his way, and then lend all his strength to Kazuki with passion. Senju Tobirama couldn't imagine that scene. Kazuki, with a pair of scarlet Sharingan, clapped his hands and stood on the head of the true several thousand hands. And there was a Hashirama in his body cheering him up, shouting Kazuki, hurry up, I still have a lot of chakra, rush for the will of fire. That kind of world is really hell. I don't know, it's none of my business, Tobirama. Kazuki frowned, but then smiled. Actually, bringing you into my body was an accident. Senju Tobirama narrowed his eyes, raised his eyebrows, and motioned Kazuki to continue. I told you, didn't I? I want to borrow your wisdom to solve the current problems between Uchiha and the village, so I need to talk to you. Kazuki looked at Tobirama calmly and lied with his eyes open. I have heard of the impure world reincarnation you developed, but my grandfather's classics did not leave any related techniques, so I tried to work backwards from the results and wanted to study this technique myself. If I can reincarnate you, can't I talk to you? Senju Tobirama laughed disdainfully. He had to admit that Kazuki was talented in ninjutsu. Even Senju Tobirama had to admit that he was far behind Kazuki when he was his age. But when it comes to the ability to develop ninjutsu and forbidden techniques, Senju Tobirama has never been defeated by anyone. In those days, whenever he developed a technique, if it was not water release, Senju Hashirama would throw it into the list of forbidden techniques. In the end, it was filled with a large scroll, so after collecting some other forbidden techniques, it was named Scroll of Seals. You want to use the impure world reincarnation. Kid, you won't dig my grave, right? Senju Tobirama's eyes became dangerous. Of course not. Why are you so extreme, old man? Do you think I am you? Kazuki looked at Senju Tobirama with contempt and said sarcastically, I feel that the third Hokage still has good eyesight. It is appropriate to give you a 0 for your will of fire. Senju Tobirama's eyebrows jumped uncontrollably. Don't change the subject, brat Kazuki. If you want me to teach you my techniques, tell me the truth. Senju Tobirama crossed his arms, but he was not very confident. If Kazuki didn't want to tell him, then Kazuki himself wouldn't lose anything. But unexpectedly, Kazuki nodded and continued to explain. You know that the first step to impure world reincarnation is to first sense the existence of the Pure Land, and then capture the specific soul through the DNA of the deceased. Tobirama, surprised, nodded. He thought that Kazuki was just using the impure world reincarnation as an excuse, but it seemed that he really had discovered something. Could it be that Kazuki was also a genius in the development of ninjutsu? What Tobirama didn't know was that thanks to the inventor of the shinobi world, Tobirama version, although Kazuki couldn't completely recreate the forbidden techniques in a short time, he could at least understand their general workings. But when I perceived the Pure Land, I felt a strong connection with a particular soul, and I decided to try to summon it. Kazuki sighed helplessly. That soul is you. As for why I can borrow your power, that's your own problem. At first I regretted the summoning. I thought I had brought about a calamity, because I immediately realized that I could transfer my chakra to you, and I was afraid that you might steal it by force. Tobirama blinked and silently tried to draw out Kazuki's chakra, but nothing happened. Kazuki frowned. It's really the evil old ghost of Senju, my worries are right. But despite saying so, Kazuki still used the connection of Senju Tobirama's power to pass his power to Senju Tobirama. So, a dramatic scene happened. Senju Tobirama's eyes turned blood-red, and a dark tomo appeared. What are you doing, kid? Take back your evil power quickly. Don't pollute me. Senju Tobirama waved his hands violently, but his body was very honest, constantly scanning the surroundings with the Sharingan. To be honest, this Sharingan is indeed much better than his eyes. Look at this observation ability and dynamic vision. It's really good. Involuntarily, Tobirama remembered when Izuna mocked him. Repent of your sad fate for not having a Sharingan. If he had a pair of these eyes, he would have beaten that bastard into incontinence. It's a pity that Uchiha Izuna is already dead. Between you and me, it's the same. I can't forcefully extract your power, and you can't do it with mine either. Kazuki took back his power, and the tomo in Senju Tobirama's eyes slowly disappeared. Inexplicably, Senju Tobirama still felt a little disappointed. He hasn't had enough. I think the obstacle is that, from the beginning, I accepted you, while you look at me with distrust, as happens between a Jinchuriki and his tailed beast. Kazuki shook his head with emotion. What can I do? I am tolerant enough, but it's hard to say about some people. Senju Tobirama snorted coldly. He didn't believe Kazuki's nonsense. If that's the case, now that he can lend his power to Kazuki, doesn't it mean that he agrees with this evil Uchiha kid? Impossible. This kind of thing is absolutely impossible. Tobirama, I remember that it seems you had already promised to teach me a technique. Kazuki glanced at Senju Tobirama and said with a smile, Why, you're not going to default on your debt, right? Senju Tobirama narrowed his eyes and said stubbornly, How is it possible? But he immediately began to think about what technique would be suitable to teach Kazuki. If he taught him some basic ninjutsu of water release or earth release, it would be too ordinary and give the impression that he lacked insight. But if he taught him a forbidden technique, he really thought Kazuki could learn it. In that case, this Uchiha kid would grow up too fast and be too scary. After careful consideration, Senju Tobirama raised his lips. He thought of a technique that he could teach Kazuki, but he couldn't use it even if he learned it. Mutually multiplying explosive tags. Although this technique was considered forbidden, it was actually not that complicated. The key was to make a large number of explosive tags and store them in an alternate space, then summon them in a chain. In short, it was a technique that depended on resources and money. As long as Tobirama taught the technique normally, but didn't give Kazuki the necessary summoning contract, it would be as if he hadn't learned anything. Tobirama was certain. Only he could sense the location of the hidden space of the explosive tags he had set up. Fighting me? You still have a long way to go, Tobirama thought, a smile appearing on his face, imagining Kazuki's frustration. I will never break my promise. Senju Tobirama raised his eyebrows in a good mood. Little boy, I will teach you a forbidden technique this time. Unlike your paper-based will of fire, my vision makes me open-minded enough. Even forbidden techniques can be taught to an evil Uchiha kid like you. Senju Tobirama smiled. Kazuki frowned slightly. Senju Tobirama's behavior was extremely abnormal. After spending so much time with him, Kazuki was sure that this old man was going to give him a hard time. This expression and demeanor are exactly the same as when Kazuki was trying to tease Tobirama. Others can't see it, but Kazuki knows it too well. Senju Tobirama looked at Kazuki's frowning brows with great pleasure and said slowly, "The technique I want to teach you is a forbidden technique I developed independently, the mutually multiplying explosive tags. I will rank it as A-rank ninjutsu. Its principle consists of using an explosive tag to continuously summon other explosive tags, concentrating them in a single point for consecutive detonations. It is so powerful that even the tailed beasts can hardly resist it if used properly." Kazuki blinked. The mutually multiplying explosive tags. He really knows this technique. Since Kazuki received this ninjutsu as a reward, he had not had time to study it in depth. First, it is not easy to explain the source of it, which may easily make the smart Senju Tobirama notice something strange, and then create a gap between him and Kazuki, and it will be difficult to borrow his power in the future. Secondly, this ninjutsu had to be used in conjunction with others, otherwise it was a suicidal technique. It was necessary to master the impure world reincarnation to use immortal bodies as kamikazes. Only then could he adjust the chain of explosions to hit the enemy accurately. Otherwise, mastering this technique alone is really useless. Furthermore, Kazuki had deduced Tobirama's true intentions. He probably wouldn't teach him how to sense the space where explosive tags are stored. In this way, the technique would be incomplete, limiting its power, and Kazuki would be doubly restricted. He would learn ninjutsu without being able to actually use it. "Old man, you've thought of everything, double restriction. There's no doubt that you're an evil Senju ghost." Kazuki thought sarcastically, but then a smile appeared on his face. Admittedly, the technique chosen by Senju Tobirama is useless, but there is a problem. What would the second Hokage think when he saw that Kazuki had created his own storage space for the explosive tags, without needing his help? Kazuki suppressed a smile and, with an expression of longing and joy, said respectfully, "I've heard of this technique, and I want to learn it, Tobirama-sensei." Senju Tobirama hummed and nodded with great satisfaction. "Since you are so sincere, I will teach you this forbidden technique with great reluctance." Senju Tobirama put on a pose, feeling secretly happy. The evil Uchiha kid. Doesn't he like to talk about my 0 points for the will of fire? Well, when you can't learn this ninjutsu, it will be my turn to make fun of you. What's wrong? The genius Uchiha can't master a technique that I've taught you so carefully. Senju Tobirama controlled his emotions very well and entered the teaching mode with the professional qualities of the first-generation ninja school principal. The first step is to prepare a huge amount of explosive tags. Kazuki's eyebrows jumped, and he whispered, "Tobirama-sensei, where can you get a huge amount of these explosive tags? For such things, can't you just tell the military factories and the shinobi of the Land of Fire?" "Oh yes, or you can let the shinobi in the clan cooperate with you, and it can be done in a few months." Senju Tobirama held back his smile. Why did he get so many explosive tags back then? After all, he was the second Hokage. Even in the Sengoku period, he was the de facto leader of the Senju clan. He could spend money however he wanted. This ninjutsu should be called Technique of Stacking Resources and Crushing Them on the Enemy. Okay, after this step is completed, put a spiritual contract on these explosive tags, and then transfer them to another space for storage. The third step, which is also the last step, is to create a summoned object that can be linked with a large number of explosive tags as a trigger for the technique. With a wave of his hand, Tobirama Senju explained this A-rank forbidden technique simply and quickly, without hiding the smile on his face. Let's do it step by step. First, prepare enough explosive tags. Don't worry, Kazuki, I will teach you everything here. Unless you are particularly stupid, then I really have no way to help you. By the way, I forgot to tell you just now, this technique is quite dangerous, and it needs to be used with the impure world reincarnation. Otherwise it will be fatal to the caster and the power of this technique will be dispersed. It's okay, you should learn this technique first. As for the impure world reincarnation, maybe someday, I'll teach it to you. Tobirama spoke as he watched Kazuki's expression, laughing out loud. At that moment, Tobirama felt that he was finally not a fool who suspended the will of fire, but a cunning second Hokage. Hey, you're too shameless. Kazuki protested, unconvinced. You should at least teach me how to create and perceive storage space, or are you afraid that I will discover your own explosive tag space? Don't try to provoke me, brat. I was already thinking teach you. Senju Tobirama crossed his arms calmly. But my explosive tag space is mine. If you have the ability, create your own. Watch out, use your perception, make these seals, and carefully mobilize chakra from the meridians. Senju Tobirama was very calm. There was no way Kazuki could access his summoning space. In fact, no one else could. If anyone can sense it, wouldn't that mean a huge amount of explosive tags have been prepared for the enemy? Senju Tobirama would never do such a thing as shooting himself in the foot. Suddenly, Kazuki began to slowly perform seals. He closed his eyes, and suddenly, an explosive tag appeared in his hand. Tobirama-sensei, is this how it's done? And Senju Tobirama, with his arms folded, nodded unexpectedly. That's right. But a moment later, Senju Tobirama seemed to have noticed something was wrong. No. Where did this explosive tag come from? Impossible. Is there another shinobi who established an explosive tag space and Kazuki discovered it? Until now, Senju Tobirama could not accept the idea that Kazuki had found his explosive tag space. As a meticulous man, he had created multiple restrictions in the space, ensuring that only he could open it. Even if it was his sister-in-law Uzumaki Mito, Senju Tobirama didn't think she could crack it in a short time, let alone Kazuki, a kid who is not good at sealing techniques. Oh, you are really lucky. There are others who have the same idea as me, and you found it. Sure enough, we can't underestimate the heroes of the ninja world. Senju Tobirama sighed, motioning for Kazuki to bring the explosive seal in his hand closer to examine it closely. He froze at the sight. This is not the explosive tag stored by others. This is his own explosive tag. Senju Tobirama's gaze remained glued to that palm-sized sheet of paper. His mind went blank, and his mouth slightly opened in a look of astonishment, losing all composure. Kazuki smiled and began to use the power of Senju Tobirama in reverse. And then, the Sharingan reappeared in Tobirama's eyes. Like to watch? Then use the Uchiha family's Sharingan to see it clearly. Take a closer look. Whose explosive tag is this? Senju Tobirama had no time to reject Uchiha's evil pupil power, and subconsciously adapted to this excellent observation ability, observing the details of the explosive tag very carefully. The more he looked, the faster the tomo in his eyes spun, to the point where they almost formed a single image. This scene made Kazuki laugh. No, how could this be possible? Senju Tobirama blinked his scarlet eyes, fell into great confusion, and his mind was in turmoil. At this moment, he began to recall the day he met Kazuki. The gears of fate began to turn from that night. From Kazuki's water release, genjutsu and kenjutsu, which were identical to his, to Kazuki's answer on the test paper on the Will of Fire, which expressed the same idea he had proposed when he was a child. Shinobi must learn to control their emotions. To Kazuki's talent for learning and transforming ninjutsu. Countless fragments flashed through Senju Tobirama's mind, connecting them together like a movie. And the anchor of all these thoughts stayed on this explosive tag today. Tobirama, am I right or wrong? Why don't you say anything? Wait, Kazuki. Let me process this for a moment. Tobirama replied, not even realizing that he hadn't called Kazuki a brat for the first time. Kazuki shrugged, and he was already happy in his heart. No, it's not right. Tobirama muttered to himself. When Kazuki taught the fire release technique to the monkey's son, he used the same methods as Uchiha Madara and Izuna. At that time I thought. At that time, not only Uchiha Madara noticed the abnormality, but also Senju Tobirama. The third person who is most familiar with the changes in the nature of Uchiha Izuna and Uchiha Madara's fire release technique is not any Uchiha, but Senju Tobirama, who has studied them the most. Although Tobirama had found the resemblance uncanny, he hadn't come to the conclusion that Kazuki was Izuna's reincarnation. After all, one or two fire release techniques were not enough to reveal the full picture. Madara was convinced that Kazuki's kenjutsu was a sign that he was the reincarnation of Izuna, but Tobirama simply thought that Kazuki had used fire release to enhance his kenjutsu, with no connection to Izuna. Tobirama had selectively ignored the fact that, after so many years of fighting, his and Izuna's kenjutsu had mixed, becoming almost indistinguishable. Especially, Senju Tobirama was the one who was best at stealing skills. He plagiarized Uchiha Izuna's moves without any psychological pressure, and he was proud of it instead of being ashamed. So, at that moment, Tobirama simply thought that he had been unlucky enough to deal with such an idiot in his previous life. Then in this life, Kazuki, who is like Izuna, should accept his transformation and work for the will of fire. Until today, Tobirama had considered Kazuki's similarities to him to be an extremely rare coincidence. However, this explosive tag seemed to be questioning everything Tobirama had believed until now. Is this really all just a coincidence? At that moment, like Madara, Tobirama remembered the most widespread theory among the Senju and Uchiha clans. The theory of reincarnation. It's impossible. If my chakra is reincarnated, how can Kazuki be so proficient in Uchiha Izuna's fire release? No, I am actually quite proficient in his fire release. Senju Tobirama frantically searched for the answer in his heart, and slowly looked at Kazuki's face, and he was stunned. After Uchiha Madara blew up his bloodline as a reward, Kazuki's appearance and aura had begun to change little by little. Although the change was subtle, Tobirama, with his sharp eye, noticed it immediately. At first glance, Kazuki didn't look much like Izuna, but the more he looked at him, the more he reminded him of Uchiha Madara. Could it be that Kazuki is the reincarnation of Uchiha Izuna? No way. If so, how is the explosive tag explained? Except for himself, no one can so easily unlock the restrictions in this space. Senju Tobirama is very sure of this. Furthermore, Kazuki was not only skilled in fire release techniques, he also perfectly mastered his water release. Senju Tobirama stared at Kazuki. The Sharingan burst out with an extremely powerful pupil power, as if to see through Kazuki from the inside out. Kazuki laughed to himself, enjoying the old man's confusion. It must be admitted that the Sharingan suits Tobirama well. His eyes were already a deep red, and now with those tomos spinning, there's nothing out of place. Why don't you say something, Tobirama? Are you pretending to be a master if you don't say anything? Kazuki said, trying to provoke a reaction. But Tobirama was still in shock, not taking his eyes off Kazuki. The tomo in his eyes were spinning at full speed. Finally, after a long silence, Tobirama opened his eyes wide, having come to an absurd, yet compelling conclusion. Damn Uchiha Izuna, even chakra is competing with mine for reincarnation. Senju Tobirama suddenly ignited his fighting spirit, roaring in his mind. You can't imagine it. My chakra and soul are in Kazuki's body, 1 against 2, the advantage is mine. When I find your chakra in Kazuki's body, I will definitely wipe you out completely. Make bold assumptions and verify them carefully. As a scientist, Tobirama has always maintained this attitude. This applies to people and things. So, Tobirama could come up with such a creative explanation. When he calmed down for a moment, got out of the bold assumption stage, and began to verify carefully. But he found that the logic was really self-consistent, and he didn't even find any loopholes. Kazuki knows his water release and kinjutsu, which are in the aspects of ninjutsu and fighting, and belong to external manifestations. And the words on the test paper of the Will of Fire that are exactly the same as Tobirama's childhood thoughts are internal manifestations. And the ultimate proof came when Tobirama remembered how Kazuki explained the way he had summoned it inside his body. If it wasn't his chakra reincarnation, how could he accurately sense his soul from the Pure Land without a medium? Furthermore, Kazuki had managed to establish a bond of power with him, handling his strength as fluidly as if it were himself, and could even access his unique explosive tag space. After this series of evidence, Senju Tobirama could no longer tell himself, this is a coincidence. How can there be so many coincidences? On the other hand, Tobirama also realized that the evidence that Kazuki was the reincarnation of Izuna was also quite strong. Izuna's Muramasa sword was a perfect match for Kazuki. Their fire release techniques were identical in nature and form, and most crucially, the Uchiha blood coming from Madara made him almost certain that Kazuki must have a connection with Izuna and Madara. From Senju Tobirama's perspective, Kazuki is the descendant of Uchiha Kagami. Doesn't he know whether he has a blood relationship with Uchiha Madara's lineage? So, apart from the reason of bloodline, there is only one possibility, reincarnation. From the target Senju Tobirama, you have obtained the Senju bloodline, Senju Tobirama version. Kazuki looked amused at Tobirama, who seemed deep in thought. Senju Tobirama exhaled a long breath. As the head of the Senju clan, he had of course heard of the reincarnation theory and even did research on it. Because of that rumor, I made an analysis of the personalities of the leaders of the Senju and Uchiha clans. Although each of them has similarities, they still have their own distinct characteristics. Therefore, the influence of my chakra and Uchiha Izuna's chakra on Kazuki is also limited. But Kazuki also has my soul in his body. Senju Tobirama instantly ignited. He would never lose in a competition with Uchiha Izuna. Kazuki looked at Senju Tobirama speechlessly. This old man had been trapped in his own world since he took out the explosive tag, and now he was inexplicably aroused. Even his hair seemed to stand on end, and the tomo on his Sharingan spun so fast that they left shadows. If he continued like this, Kazuki feared that Tobirama would awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan before him. Kazuki, little brat, I accept your explanation for the time being. Senju Tobirama pretended not to see Kazuki's playful expression, coughed and said, in the future, if you want to borrow my power under reasonable circumstances, you can still come to me for discussion. Kazuki raised his eyebrows. Forget it, Tobirama. Your power is just Isuzu. Kazuki looked at Tobirama's Sharingan with a smile, and whispered, how is it? Isn't the power of Sharingan very intuitive and powerful? Senju Tobirama subconsciously wanted to nod. This eye is really useful, and it is a perfect match for his fighting style. But then, he shook his head disdainfully. Little boy, don't brag. I don't need to tell you who Uchiha Izuna was defeated by. Who asked you? Kazuki rolled his eyes at Tobirama. Okay, the matter has been explained clearly. I'm going to practice. Tobirama stared at the disappearing image of Kazuki. I don't know if it's a psychological suggestion, but Tobirama always felt that Kazuki, who once resembled Madara, now had an air that reminded him of himself. Hokage residence. Old man, I must refuse this. When I returned to Mount Mayaboku this time, the great Toad Sage gave me a new prophecy. Jiraiya waved his hands repeatedly, his eyes solemn. The prophecy has changed greatly compared to before. I must find the child of prophecy as soon as possible. I am afraid I don't have time to take Asuma and this Uchiha kid. Jiraiya didn't say anything else. His apprentice had the opportunity to become the child of prophecy. If he accepted Asuma and Kazuki, he might break the predetermined fate and make the whole shinobi world more chaotic. Sarutobi Hiruzen narrowed his eyes, lit up his pipe, and smoked slowly. He was very dissatisfied. Jiraiya, what does the forehead protector with the word oil on your forehead mean? Don't you want to be a Konoha ninja anymore? Sarutobi Hiruzen stared at Jiraiya's forehead protector and said in a deep voice, where is your Konoha forehead protector? For a shinobi, the forehead protector is a very important and symbolic accessory and protective gear. Almost all missing nin will choose to wear a forehead protector with a village pattern crossed out, which means they will break off the ties with the past and their lives. Jiraiya changing his protector without permission was something Hiruzen only tolerated because he was his disciple. Any other shinobi, even one as prominent as Sakumo, would have been reprimanded and subjected to a rigorous investigation. Jiraiya scratched his head, giving a carefree smile as he watched Hiruzen grow increasingly irritated. Old man, this is a mission from Mount Mayaboku to save the shinobi world. It's not just about Konoha's affairs. Don't worry, I will be a ninja of Konoha regardless of life or death. But before I die, I still have to find a way to find the child of prophecy to save this world. Sarutobi Hiruzen exhaled a puff of smoke and waved his hand irritably. Go away, go away. Do what you want with your toads. Jiraiya smiled and turned around and left. After leaving the door, he looked back and said, take care of your health, old man, remember to smoke less. With that, he quickly disappeared. Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head helplessly. Mount Mayaboku is one of the 3 great sacred places of the shinobi world, home to powerful summoning beasts that have the ability to turn the tide of a battle, as well as the art of senjutsu, which all shinobi desire to master. Although Hiruzen was frustrated by how Mount Mayaboku controlled one of Konoha's most important ninja, he knew he couldn't afford to antagonize those toads. What's more, Jiraiya had even changed his protector. Some things are no longer worth discussing in this situation, Hiruzen thought. It's better to let Jiraiya continue doing what he's doing, and try to get more Konoha shinobi to sign the summoning scroll. Alas, Jiraiya, why do you listen to a group of toads? Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head in disappointment. He has always believed that shinobi can drive summoned beasts, but he has never heard of shinobi being ordered by summoned beasts. If those toads were so powerful, why didn't they appear during the first or second Hokage eras? With Jiraiya's attitude, he can't be the teacher of Kazuki and Asuma. These 2 children are the future of Konoha, and they should stay away from those toads. Then it can only be Tsunade. Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled bitterly. Compared with Jiraiya who obeyed Mount Mayaboku, Tsunade, who gave up on herself, was also quite worrying. Can she really be a good teacher in this state? And Orochimaru. His relationship with him had grown greatly distant. To ensure that Asuma had a teacher aligned with the Hokage line, there were not many options. My 3 apprentices, Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed and told the ANBU beside him. Call Tsunade. Are you kidding me, old man? Tsunade sat on a chair in front of Hiruzen, crossing her arms and moving her leg impatiently. I don't agree. Have Asuma and that Uchiha brat find another, more suitable teacher. Sarutobi Hiruzen's face froze. He didn't know how he, as a teacher, became like this. 2 of the 3 apprentices didn't wear Konoha forehead protectors. If they weren't a little famous, no one would know that they were Konoha shinobi. The only one who wore a forehead protector seriously was secretly doing human experiments to hide him and mixed up with Shimura Danzo. This really made him not know what to say. Tsunade coughed lightly. She had been drinking until dawn the night before, and only when the ANBU found her did she reluctantly get up. The matter of accepting Asuma and Kazuki as apprentices. Tsunade is somewhat interested in Kazuki, the Uchiha kid who has mastered the mystical palm technique and can teach it to other ninja school students. But thinking about her own life so far, her interest was fading. The dissolution of her clan, the death of her loved ones, and the separation from her former companions. She had no desire to take on a disciple. She was even afraid of the idea. In her heart, she has already vaguely felt that she is an unfortunate woman. Tsunade, I know it's not easy for you. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed faintly and said slowly, but this is not that I want to trouble you, but for the future of Konoha, I have to find you. What does the future of the village have to do with me? I have already paid a lot for Konoha. Why are you still looking for me? Tsunade waved her hand impatiently and said sternly. Sarutobi Hiruzen's face froze, and even the ANBU hiding in the Hokage's office quickly turned their eyes away, trying to reduce their presence again, for fear of attracting the attention of these 2. Things that other Konoha shinobi wouldn't dare to even imagine. Tsunade would say directly to the Hokage, and absolutely nothing would happen. Even if Tsunade breaks the Konoha forehead protector in half now, everyone will think that she is drunk and joking, and the girl is just ignorant. If anyone dares to go out and say something, then the next day that person may not be seen. Tsunade, I have no choice. In order to fulfill the will of Tobirama-sensei, I can only find you. Sarutobi Hiruzen smiled bitterly, looking like he really had no choice, and said slowly, you also know that Tobirama-sensei has put a lot of effort into solving the problems of the Uchiha clan and the village. Of course, the effect is also very good. Under the leadership of Kagami, the Uchiha clan has already had a trend of merging with Konoha, but Kagami's death due to the war interrupted this process. Nowadays, you know the tense relationship between the Uchiha clan and the village, but there is a special child, Uchiha Kazuki. Hiruzen continued talking, praising how special Kazuki was, how he had excelled in his Will of Fire exam, and how he had helped Asuma learn fire release techniques. When she heard the name of Senju Tobirama, Tsunade, who was originally impatient, sat up straight and listened carefully. That's the thing, Tsunade. Do you know why I chose you? Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. I won't comment much on Jiraiya and Mount Mayaboku. You can see the state of Orochimaru, so only you are suitable to be the teacher of Asuma and Kazuki. Tsunade was silent, and the appearance of Senju Tobirama flashed before her eyes. Tsunade knew that what Sarutobi Hiruzen said was true. This was indeed the wish of her second grandfather and the stubborn disease of the village today. Furthermore, thinking about Kazuki, an Uchiha expert in medical ninjutsu, who cared about healing his companions and used his Sharingan to teach ninjutsu, Tsunade could not feel rejection. In fact, she was starting to get interested. I can try, old man, but I have to make it clear that I may not be able to do it well. Tsunade fell on her seat and said very simply, you've seen the state I'm in. A medical nin with hemophobia. It's ridiculous. Anyway, you just want to use my identity to give Asuma and Uchiha Kazuki an identity, right? Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head. I believe you, Tsunade. You will complete the task excellently. Also, as your sensei who has seen you grow, I hope that love and bonds can once again blossom in your heart. Tsunade snorted coldly and waved her hand. Stop talking about these meaningless words, old man. I reluctantly agreed to this matter, and I'm leaving. As soon as Tsunade finished speaking, she left in a hurry. Hiruzen watched her go as he lit his pipe, sighing wistfully. Compared to Orochimaru and Jiraiya, Tsunade was the only one who still listened to what he said. Ah, it's really tiring. I hope Asuma and Kazuki will grow up quickly. Hiruzen massaged his aching back, reflecting on how the years are unforgiving, and thought to himself, I can only pave the way for you. But true growth is up to you. Good luck. While Sarutobi Hiruzen was paving the way for Asuma and Kazuki, Black Zetsu, who had observed Uchiha Obito for a long time, also began to pave the way for the Moon Eye Plan. With Black Zetsu's eyesight of observing Indra's reincarnation and the Uchiha clan for thousands of years, it has accurately captured Uchiha Obito's heart. He craved attention. Above all, he craved to be needed. He was extremely sensitive and easily manipulated to extremes. Black Zetsu admits that Uchiha Madara is indeed good at judging people, and Uchiha Obito is born to be a good material for a chess piece. Today, Black Zetsu summoned dozens of strong white Zetsu, lurking in all directions of Konoha, pretending to be shinobi of the enemy country. Under the deliberate propaganda of Uchiha Setsuna, Uchiha Obito's reputation in Konoha is getting bigger and bigger. It must be said that a 7-year-old Uchiha with 2 tomo is indeed worthy of praise. Uchiha Obito also showed amazing talent, and quickly learned all kinds of ninjutsu taught by Uchiha Setsuna, proving that he is indeed a genius. And in order to win Uchiha Obito's heart, Black Zetsu designed a beauty-saving-the-hero script. A young genius from Konoha, whose fame makes him a target for enemy assassins, is saved at the last moment by the girl who has always secretly loved him. How could a young man withstand such a level of sacrifice? Black Zetsu, now also called Uchiha Rin, quietly looked at Uchiha Obito not far away and grinned. All white Zetsu, ready. Let's follow the plan. It's time to act. Konoha, under the planning of Black Zetsu, became a stage. The barrier protecting the village was useless against White Zetsu's MYFLY technique, allowing the actors to easily infiltrate. When Black Zetsu gave an order, the elite White Zetsu acted in an orderly manner. One group was responsible for creating a riot to attract the attention of the Konoha Guard and the Umbu, ensuring that there was no interference from external factors on the set. One group kept a close eye on Uchiha Obito, who was eating in the store and was ready to start a good show. I have basically mastered the fire release that Elder Setsuna taught me. The next step is to review the Shuriken Jutsu and the pupil technique of the Sharingan. I am getting stronger and stronger. Uchiha Obito was thinking about training in his mind. He used a spoon to dig the rice bowl in front of him and stuffed it into his mouth. He muttered to himself vaguely, Uchiha Kazuki, I will definitely defeat you and tell the village, Rin, and everyone who is the real genius. A genius of the Uchiha clan like me should use strength to own everything, as Elder Setsuna said. And anyone who stands in my way will be defeated by my eyes. Even when eating, Uchiha Obito was still talking about training and Kazuki. He seemed to be possessed by a demon. He was seizing every opportunity to work hard, and he had a bit of the style of Uchiha Might Guy. The mentality of ignoring others made Uchiha Obito not notice Uchiha Rin sitting quietly beside him. Uchiha Rin, Black Zetsu, looked at Uchiha Obito's hard work with a smile, her eyes full of pampering, and she sighed in her mind, You are really working hard, Obito, keep working hard. Just practice seriously, learn all the ninjutsu and eye techniques, and become the destroyer of this world. As a reward, I will grant you an unforgettable experience. Uchiha Obito was still eating big mouthfuls of rice and added a few more portions of meat and eggs to replenish the physical strength lost under high-intensity training. After a while, when he burped and stretched out to relax, something strange happened. The restaurant owner, who had been very kind until then, suddenly showed a twisted expression. He took out a sharp ninja sword and swung it forcefully towards Obito's head. Uchiha Obito was startled, but the recent high-intensity training allowed him to react. His double Tomo Sharingan emerged, and a kunai flew out of his hand, accurately blocking the sword. Something is wrong. Such a strong force. Is it a shinobi from another village? Uchiha Obito gritted his teeth, resisting the huge force from the ninja sword, his face gradually flushed. He. The 7-year-old genius of the Uchiha clan. In order to prevent you from becoming the next Uchiha Madara, it's better for you to die here. The restaurant owner said, his expression completely distorted, as he muttered madly. Your power is weaker than a piece of excrement. You're still a child without strength. Die. Uchiha Obito breathed heavily. The elite White Zetsu may not have any powerful ninjutsu except wood release, but his strength is extraordinary, far beyond what he can resist. Sharingan. I need to use the power of Sharingan. Uchiha Obito quickly recalled the practical skills taught by Uchiha Setsuna in his mind. The tomo in his eyes spun rapidly, staring straight at the eyes of the shop owner. Fall down, and wail under the power of Sharingan. But to his surprise, the shop owner just swayed his body, and then said with a grin, "Double tomo Sharingan? Hee hee." At that instant, Obito heard a sharp sound breaking through the air behind him. One of the diners in the restaurant had pulled out a dagger and was aiming it at his back. The small shop seemed to have become a coliseum for hunting Uchiha Obito, with endless ambushes on all sides. Uchiha Rin, who was sitting next to Uchiha Obito, also moved at this moment. Uchiha Obito was sweating profusely. The shop owner's blade in front of him was already difficult for him to resist. He was still trying to deal with the stab from behind. Now there was another surprise attack from the side. In a trance, Uchiha Obito seemed to see himself being pierced from the chest, back and abdomen by 3 ninja swords, and he couldn't die anymore. Uchiha Setsuna had never taught him how to break this kind of must-kill situation. At this moment, Uchiha Obito was extremely anxious. If he had a pair of 3 tomo Sharingan, perhaps he could directly break the offensive of the shop owner in front of him when the crisis began and resolve his own crisis. But it was different from what he expected. Uchiha Rin on the side was not here to attack him, but an angel to save him. Uchiha Rin opened her hands and stood in front of Uchiha Obito, taking the inevitable blow from behind for him. The ninja sword ruthlessly pierced through Uchiha Rin's body, and blood was all over the floor. Uchiha Obito was stunned, and the shop owner in front of him quietly withdrew his strength and shook on the spot. Damn it! The Sharingan Jinjutsu is so annoying. When Uchiha Obito turned around, he saw Uchiha Rin, whose profile looked very much like Rin, blocking the fatal blow for him. Rin. It was as if an electric shock fell on Obito's brain, and just as he was about to launch into an endless rage, he saw the familiar emblem on Uchiha Rin's clothes, and her face that resembled Rin but was not when he looked closely. Obito became confused again in an instant. Who is this? Why did she save me? I don't know her. But in his eyes, the double tomo was still spinning and turned into a 3 tomo style. At this moment, Uchiha Obito felt the rising power in his eyes, glared at the shop owner angrily, and kicked over the diner who pierced Uchiha Rin. Let's go, the assassination failed. The shop owner lamented. If Kazuki were to see them, he would say that the performance was terrible, but it was in line with Uchiha Obito's cognition and taste. The diner and the shop owner threw a huge amount of smoke bombs. In a blink of an eye, the 2 white Zetsu, who were the main actors, hid in the earth with the help of the smoke and could never be found again. So the shop that was just full of dangers returned to peace, with only Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Rin lying in a pool of blood. Uchiha Obito hurried over to support Uchiha Rin, his eyes full of anxiety. Are you okay? I'll take you to see a doctor now. The girl, with a weak smile, spat out a bit of blood that stained her pale face, giving her a tragic and beautiful air that left Obito deeply shocked. And Uchiha Rin's next words directly froze him. So you really don't know me? In that case, don't save me, I'm not the Rin you just called. Uchiha Rin barely finished this sentence, and the whole person fainted, even his breath was not stable. Uchiha Obito was stunned, feeling Uchiha Rin's gradually decreasing body temperature, and the next moment he picked her up very gently, and then ran towards the Uchiha clan like crazy. In any training, Uchiha Obito has never run at this speed, and he is holding someone now. And Uchiha Rin in his arms. At that moment she was humming songs from ancient times in her mind, feeling very happy and relaxed. Even Indra was a plaything in his hands. A little Uchiha. Black Zetsu didn't take him seriously. Uchiha Obito is captured. While Uchiha Obito and Black Zetsu were acting out a sad love movie. At the other end of Konoha, Asuma and Kurenai were sitting in a luxuriously decorated shop eating snacks. Ah. I really don't know when there will be a result. Asuma handed Kurenai a dessert, drank the drink in his hand, and said to himself with a very sad expression. It has been a week since he knelt down to admit his mistake to his father and begged to be assigned to the same team with Kazuki. Until now, there is no news. His father had told him to go home and wait. That it wasn't an easy thing to arrange, that it required coordination. He would only try because he was his son, but he had warned him not to get his hopes up too high. Asuma, who is still relatively naive, really thought that this matter is difficult to handle. After all, Kazuki is an Uchiha. Probably needs approval from the two advisors and the Hokage's assistant, right? Having the Hokage's son and an Uchiha on the same team. It was certainly a sensitive subject with a lot of potential for controversy. What Asuma doesn't know is that no matter whether it is the Konoha advisor or the Hokage assistant, they usually look very prestigious and powerful. But when Sarutobi Hiruzen really wants to do something, they are no different from ordinary genin. No one can interfere with what Sarutobi Hiruzen really wants to do in Konoha. Shimura Danzo's slamming of the door can only be heard, but when Sarutobi Hiruzen slams the table, the whole village has to listen to him. As early as the day after Asuma finished speaking, Sarutobi Hiruzen found Jiraiya and Tsunade and arranged this matter. He hasn't told him yet, but Sarutobi Hiruzen is teasing Asuma's appetite and using small tricks to educate this rebellious little son. Asuma was still too young to realize his cunning father's tricks. Kurenai enjoyed a bite of her dessert as she curiously watched Asuma's worried expression. In the past, Asuma was rebellious. Even a child like Yuhi Kurenai thought he was just being mysterious. But recently, not only has Asuma's strength improved by leaps and bounds, but his words seemed to be laden with unexpected wisdom. Even the melancholy on his face now seemed more real, giving him an enigmatic air that Kurenai couldn't help but find appealing. On the other hand, Asuma was immersed in thought while lighting a cigarette. He could only think about one thing. What will I do if I don't make it on the same team as Kazuki? Moments later, he took a deep breath and muttered, "Kazuki, Kazuki." Yuhi Kurenai, who had been ignored since they met, finally couldn't take it anymore. "Asuma, did you listen to me?" Yuhi Kurenai angrily pushed Asuma's arm and said viciously, "Still talking about Kazuki, I am Yuhi Kurenai, not Uchiha Kazuki." Asuma, surprised, woke up from his reverie and smiled at Kurenai, although his eyes reflected a deep sadness. During those days, Asuma had been meditating deeply on the future of Konoha, just as Kazuki had suggested. He had been so focused on those thoughts that trivial things like dating seemed like a waste of time. That is, he was waiting for the news of the team division recently, otherwise he would probably be practicing with Kazuki now. I was wondering if Kazuki and I could be assigned to the same team. Asuma shook his head and said slowly, "Although I have asked my father, I am afraid this matter is difficult to handle." Yuhi Kurenai widened her eyes. "Didn't you say before that we would go to the same team together after graduation?" Asuma smiled, lit a flame in his hand and tried to imitate Kazuki's posture when lighting the fire dragon for him at that moment. After a while, a vague Konoha totem rose on Asuma's finger. Although the degree of change in form is far from the same level as Kazuki, it is enough to shock a ninja school student like Yuhi Kurenai. Yuhi Kurenai looked at Asuma under the light of the fire and was stunned. "Kurenai, it's not that I don't want to be in the same class with you." Asuma stared at the flame Konoha totem in his hand, and his voice became solemn. "But there are always some important things that have to be done, so I have to give up some things." Kurenai blinked at him, not knowing how to react. Asuma, despite being the same, somehow felt different. If she had contact with Asuma before, a considerable part of it was because of the identity of the son of Hokage, then now she really had an interest in and a good impression of Asuma himself. Asuma looked at Yuhi Kurenai with an inexplicable expression and sighed in his heart. In such a big Konoha, even Yuhi Kurenai beside him could not understand his heart. Only Kazuki saw the real depression in his heart, and he was his only like-minded partner. "Boy, your father asked you to come see him and said that your matter had been resolved." Just then, Sarutobi Shinosuke walked in from the door with a smile, and winked at Asuma and said, "Hey, why are you still smoking such expensive cigarettes? You are not allowed to smoke, I confiscate them." Sarutobi Shinosuke saw the cigarettes in Asuma's pocket very well, and took them into his own pocket lightly, with a very skillful technique. Asuma's face fell immediately, and he whispered in his mouth, "The head of the ANBU of Konoha not only skipped work but also robbed a child's things. I think this village is finished, it's finished." But soon, Asuma's face was full of joy. "It has been settled. Doesn't that mean that Sarutobi Hiruzen agreed to his request? That means that he can be in the same team with Kazuki." Asuma stood up suddenly, and just as he was about to trot to the Hokage residence, he remembered Kurenai. Kurenai looked at Asuma with resentment, but there was a strange glow in her eyes. "Forgive me, Kurenai." Asuma gave her a light tap on the forehead. "Next time I promise I'll spend more time with you." With those words, he ran off with renewed energy. Kurenai stared blankly at Asuma's back. Sarutobi Shinasuke shrugged. This kid, he's always so impatient. Uchiha Obito ran wildly, and the black Zetsu in his arms was speechless. No, I was stabbed. What do you mean by running to the Uchiha clan without taking me to the hospital? Don't you know that the Uchiha clan is good at Genjutsu and Sharingan, not medical ninjutsu? Medical ninja is a rare thing. How many people in the Uchiha clan will practice it? Uchiha Izuna was so noble back then, but after being stabbed in the chest by Senju Tobirama, did you see anyone cure him? Black Zetsu complained about Uchiha Obito's IQ in his mind. It was a good thing that he was a fake person. If he was a real person, he would have been killed by Obito's brain circuit. After a while, Uchiha Obito, who had already run to the clan's land, was suddenly startled and stopped suddenly. In a trance, he remembered what Uchiha Setsuna had said to him. Those despicable guys of the Senju clan can't beat us in a head-on battle. It's just that they are good at young escape, so they know a few medical ninjutsu, and always hide to heal their wounds before fighting us. But it doesn't matter, Obito, the strong will kill the weak in seconds. As long as your eyes are strong enough, you won't give them a chance to escape. At that time, Uchiha Setsuna's words made Uchiha Obito's blood boil. The Sharingan is already invincible. Do you still need to borrow medical skills? Uchiha Kazuki, you have taken the wrong path. But now recalling it, Uchiha Obito felt like he was falling into an ice cave. The Uchiha clan, however, does not have any shinobi who know medical ninjutsu. Even if there are, they are only very superficial ones. Obito looked down and saw Rin's serious wound, still bleeding profusely. His pupils trembled. Don't underestimate this blood. In order to make the role-playing seamless, Uchiha Rin's small body is made of white Zetsu and human body and is jointly transformed by black Zetsu and Uchiha Madara. It can be called a masterpiece of craftsmanship. If it is not disassembled by violent means, it is difficult to see the flaws. Not to mention that it can bleed, it can even be used. Go to the hospital? Is it too late? Obito was sweating profusely, regretting his stupidity, as he frantically thought of other solutions. Suddenly, he thought of Kazuki. Kazuki's medical ninjutsu has become famous in Konoha. In this regard, Kazuki's treatment of Might Guy and Might Due can only account for a small part. The big part is that the drunk Tsunade talked nonsense in the tavern and severely criticized Konoha's current lack of attention to medical ninjutsu. If even an Uchiha can master the mystical palm technique, what excuse do other shinobi have? This was how Kazuki's reputation as a skilled medic began to spread, even among members of the Uchiha clan. I can only go to him, go to Uchiha Kazuki. Uchiha Obito gritted his teeth, and his brain finally made a somewhat logical decision in the chaos. He didn't go to the hospital because Uchiha Setsuna instilled in him the impression that Konoha was unreliable, and he subconsciously went to him, the clan elder, when something happened. But the problem is that Uchiha Setsuna is not very good at saving people. Uchiha Obito, who just realized this, rushed to Kazuki's home. But the black Zetsu in his arms was stagnant. This is different from his plan. If everything had gone well, Obito would have taken her to the hospital to revive her, thus beginning the next phase of the plot. But with this strange move by Obito, Kazuki was now involved. For Kazuki, Black Zetsu's attitude is to observe for the time being and try not to contact it as much as possible. First, Uchiha Madara values Kazuki, which makes Black Zetsu dare not play some tricks on Kazuki like he played with Uchiha Obito. Second, it is due to the complexity of Kazuki. After reading White Zetsu's intelligence, Black Zetsu and a certain second Hokage came to the same conclusion. Kazuki, most likely, is the dual reincarnation of Senju Tobirama and Uchiha Izuna. Even Black Zetsu wanted to say that he had never seen this scene. So, even if Black Zetsu was very interested in Kazuki and thought he was a better plan executor than Uchiha Obito, he planned to wait and see for the time being. But Uchiha Obito did not give it a chance to hide himself and rushed to Kazuki's house with Black Zetsu in his arms. Obito, is your brain made of garbage? Black Zetsu muttered in his mind. It had decided that after Uchiha Obito became obsessed with it, he would teach him a lesson every day. In front of Kazuki's house, Obito stared at the wide front door. He gritted his teeth and raised his foot, ready to kick it. He wanted Kazuki to heal Uchiha Rin directly. Any second of time wasted was fatal in his eyes. Young man, breaking into someone else's house is not polite behavior. A figure dressed in green appeared from the roof, standing in front of Obito. If you're looking for Kazuka-sama, you can talk to me, The crazy Due. Uchiha Obito sneered. Get out of the way, I want Uchiha Kazuki to heal her. As he said that, Obito continued forward, but Due's strong arms stopped him. Please wait for me to notify first. Uchiha Obito's pupil power surged, and instantly turned into a 3-tomo Sharingan and glared at Might Due. However, Due reacted faster, abruptly tilting his head to avoid eye contact with Obito. Then with agility, he wrapped his arms around Obito's waist and with surprising smoothness, threw him and Black Zetsu out. Impressive ocular power, young man, Due said, looking at Obito's legs. But even with a Sharingan, as long as I don't see it directly, it doesn't affect me. Obito, still on the ground, stared in astonishment at Due's muscles, so bulging that they seemed about to burst through his tight green suit. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was he the father of Might Guy, that strange genin? How could he have become so strong in just a few months? Uchiha Obito, do you think you are the only one with Sharingan? The door opened. Shursui walked out slowly with a sullen look on his face, holding a katana. Oh, you are quite capable. You have even been promoted to a 3-tomo Sharingan. Want to compete with me in pupil power? Shursui's tone was cold, and he made a seal with his hands, and the 2-tomo in his eyes spun violently. Shursui-kun, the master must not take action. Might Due shed tears and looked excited. For several months I, a guard, have been eating meat and taking medicinal baths. I have wasted so much salary and resources, waiting for an impolite person to come to the door. Today, let Kazuki-sama see the power of my burning youth. Shursui's face changed instantly, and his tone became flustered. Uncle Due, it's not necessary. Really, it's not necessary. Is it really unnecessary? Shursui-kun. Might Due lowered his head, his muscles bulging. That rude guy cannot be treated lightly if we want to protect family peace. Shursui was sweating. He couldn't make out what Might Due meant by burning his youth, but he feared that he was going to open several of the 8 gates to confront Obito. Uncle Due, don't show your youth easily, at least save it until tonight. Kazuki walked out of the gate slowly, smiled and patted Due's shoulder. I've said it before, try to keep a low profile in the village, Uncle Due. Otherwise, if someone snatches you from me, I'll be very distressed. Might Due laughed. Kazuki-sama, we signed a mission contract with no time limit. By the way, is there anything special you'd like me to do tonight? Might Due's expression became serious again, and he said seriously, youth can burn at any time. Kazuki looked at Might Due with amusement and said helplessly, tonight we will have a feast of beef, and then we will take a medicinal bath. Without you, we would not be able to consume all that food, it would be a waste. Due's expression relaxed, and he touched his head and smiled foolishly. Then I really am indispensable. What a heavy burden youth is. Uchiha Obito looked at this scene, sneered, and said in his mind, Kazuki, get caught up in those trivial and sentimental moments. Just like I did in the past, wasting time on meaningless things. Without strength, you can't protect anything. Developing relationships with low-ranking shinobi is worthless. When Obito thought of the power, he looked at the figure curled up in his arms, and gritted his teeth, hesitating to speak. He wanted to ask Kazuki for help, but he didn't dare to open his mouth. After all, he hadn't even managed to enter the house. Kazuki glanced at Obito, then looked at the girl in his arms, with interest flashing in his eyes. Where did this girl come from? At first glance, she resembles Noera Rin, but a closer look shows that she is not. Her facial features are so delicate that Kazuki inexplicably thinks of the artificially created faces for video games in his previous life. If Kazuki didn't know that this was a real person, he would have thought that this was a fantasy created by Uchiha Obito to comfort himself. Finally, Obito gathered his courage and said with a trembling voice, trying to sound firm, Kazuki, there's been an attack in the village. Someone tried to kill me. She saved me, she took a stab in the chest for me. Can you save her? I'm begging you. Kazuki nodded. Healing and saving people is my hobby. Uchiha Obito was overjoyed, and according to Kazuki's instructions, he carefully carried Uchiha Rin into the gate, looking at Kazuki nervously, not even daring to breathe. Kazuki looked at the girl with interest, and the Sharingan in his eyes began to spin. Under the careful observation of the Sharingan, the structure of Uchiha Rin's body was clearly visible, but there was nothing strange about it. A very normal human body. A green fluorescent light flashed in Kazuki's hand, and he slowly pressed his palm on the wound on Uchiha Rin's chest. Uchiha Obito's face froze, and he felt very uncomfortable, as if something important had left him. Last time, it was no error Rin. Shursui sneered at Uchiha Obito's expression, and felt more and more that this fellow was a hopeless guy. And Kazuki ignored Uchiha Obito. When his palm touched Uchiha Rin's body, he found something strange. There is no problem with the human body structure, the chakra flow, and the wound. The only problem is that the chakra and vitality contained in Uchiha Rin's body are too much. Kazuki looked at the clan emblem on Uchiha Rin's clothes and became more and more interested. If Kazuki didn't have the perception ability of Senju Tobirama, he wouldn't have noticed it even at such a close distance. In an ordinary shinobi, life energy flows evenly throughout the body. However, in her, it seemed that there was a core, from which a disproportionate amount of energy emanated, as if there was something strange inside her body. A many-tailed beast? Especially this wound is outrageous. Although the blood is still flowing, with this level of vitality, how can it not heal itself after so long? Kazuki sensed Uchiha Rin's body very seriously and felt more and more strange. This feeling of vitality and chakra. It doesn't look like the Uchiha clan at all, but has the shadow of the Senju clan. Black Zetsu hid in Uchiha Rin's body, watching Kazuki's expression, and inexplicably became a little flustered. Originally, Black Zetsu was very confident that Uchiha Rin's body should be flawless. Even if Uchiha Obito's insanity caused him to contact Kazuki in advance, there was no reason for the flaws to be seen. But Kazuki's strange expression made Black Zetsu feel that he seemed to have seen something. While Kazuki pretended to treat Uchiha Rin's wounds, he was thinking rapidly. An Uchiha who has a chakra level and physical characteristics similar to a Senju? Except for himself, there should be no second person in this shinobi world. So where did this strange Uchiha girl come from? Kazuki stopped the blood from Uchiha Rin's wound, and naturally took a small amount of blood and flesh on his hand and shook his head. Obito, she doesn't need treatment. Uchiha Obito stared blankly at Uchiha Rin, who was still sleeping, and then looked at Kazuki's expression, and suddenly became furious. You killed her. Kazuki, give me an explanation. Uchiha Obito looked like a madman, but the next moment he was pressed on the floor by Might Due and Shursui. He couldn't even move his limbs and could only howl some ugly words in his mouth. Kazuki frowned. From the target Uchiha Obito, you get the 3-tome Sharingan. Hearing the reward, Kazuki looked at Uchiha Obito, who was still yelling, and laughed. He probably didn't even warm up the 3-tomo Sharingan before he rushed to give it to me? I, Uchiha Kazuki, recognize this sincerity. Uchiha Obito, her injury has healed. Just take her back and take her to rest. Kazuki waved his hand. Let him go. If the patient has any follow-up problems, you can come to me. Uchiha Obito's expression suddenly became extremely happy, and he thanked repeatedly. Thank you, Kazuki. Kazuki shook his head and signaled Uchiha Obito to quickly pick up Uchiha Rin on the ground. Uchiha Obito stood up very quickly, as if he was afraid that Kazuki would steal something from him again, and ran out quickly with the girl in his arms. Shursui watched him coldly. Brother, he is really an ungrateful person. This time, even Might Due frowned and commented. There is no youth in this boy's heart. And Kazuki just smiled. Let's not talk about him. It's time to prepare tonight's feast. Shursui and Might Due cheered and ran to the kitchen to get busy. After they left, Kazuki slowly looked at the meat sample in his hand and infused chakra into it. So this flesh changed dramatically, first from bright blood red to pale white, and then grew into a slender sapling. Seeing this familiar situation, Kazuki smiled. Work hard. Although I don't know whether you are Black Zetsu or Uchiha Madara, please try your best to help me develop a pair of powerful Mangekyo. I am not interested in Obito now. Obito, you should also take love seriously. Wait for a while before I grow up and become the target of attention. You must not let the old man or Black Zetsu direct their attention towards me, otherwise I will be very worried. Kazuki burned the sapling in his hand with fire and turned to walk into the kitchen. Uncle Due, let Guy call Rin over as well. It will be livelier to have more people to eat at night. Okay. Uchiha clan territory. Training ground. After daily training, Uchiha Obito sat aside with a sad face. Unlike his previous energetic appearance, he was particularly uninterested today. As his sparring partner and intimate grandfather, Uchiha Setsuna keenly captured Uchiha Obito's strange emotions. To Setsuna, Obito was so precious that he treated him like a fragile treasure, fearing that he would break if he didn't take good care of him. For his dream of reviving the Uchiha Hawks and for the will of Madara in his heart, this old man who has been squatting for more than 20 years is willing to give everything. "What's wrong, kid?" Uchiha Setsuna sat beside him, rubbed his head, and handed him a bottle of cold water. "If something is bothering you, tell me. I may not have your talent, but I've lived long enough to have learned a few things." Obito sighed deeply and pointed to his eyes. "Clan Elder Setsuna, I'm thinking about how Uchiha Rin saved me. Are you worried about who the attacker was?" The explanation from Konoha's high-level officials is that they are missing men led by an unknown shinobi village. But according to my information, the only shinobi who was actually attacked is you. Uchiha Setsuna's expression became ferocious. This is an attack on the Uchiha genius by the Konoha high-level officials. The mastermind behind it must be Shimura Danzo. That bastard who inherited the will of Senju Tobirama has always targeted our Uchiha and used all means. Uchiha Setsuna seized every opportunity to instill the darkness of the Konoha high-level officials into Uchiha Obito. It can only be said that if Uchiha Fugaku had half the skills of this clan elder, perhaps what he cultivated would not be a weasel, but a mad dog that bites outsiders. But Uchiha Obito did not criticize Konoha with Uchiha Setsuna as usual. He still looked gloomy and unhappy. "Setsuna clan elder, let's put aside the matter of assassinating me." Uchiha Obito covered his face with both hands and said in a confused tone, "That day I went to visit Uchiha Rin. I thought she saved me because she might like me, but she asked me to leave. Why didn't she want to talk to me? Then why did she save me?" Uchiha Obito fell into deep confusion. The day Uchiha Rin woke up, the first thing she did was tell Obito to stay away, that she didn't want to talk to him. Her sadness and the pain in her eyes had touched Obito's heart deeply. For several days, this thought had haunted him. "Oh." Uchiha Setsuna's eyes flashed, and he said slowly, "Tell me everything calmly. At this point in my life, I have quite a bit of experience when it comes to love." Uchiha Obito raised his head suddenly. "Really? Setsuna clan elder." So, Uchiha Obito told the story of that day in detail and repeated the conversation between the two. After listening to the story, Uchiha Setsuna laughed from the bottom of his heart, feeling sad about Uchiha Obito's slowness and surprised by the appearance of Uchiha Rin. Noara Rin was taken away by the evil Uchiha Kazuki, and another Uchiha Rin jumped out of the clan. It was perfect. If there was no strong emotional bond, how could the Mangekyo Sharingan awaken in Obito? At that moment, Setsuna and Black Zetsu's minds coincided. One wanted to push Obito towards a tragic romance. The other wanted to strengthen that love to make him awaken the greatest power of the Uchiha clan. Black Zetsu did not choose to use a simple secret love character, but brought a bit of tsundere for special attacks at this age, and successfully grasped Uchiha Obito's heart. Uchiha Setsuna acted as the wingman very well, and began to interpret and brainwash Uchiha Obito. "Obito, you don't understand women's minds at all." Uchiha Setsuna raised the corner of his mouth, rubbed Uchiha Obito's hedgehog head with his hand, and said leisurely, "A woman who gave up her life to save you, although you called the right name but recognized the wrong person. How sad it is. Think about it, Obito. If one day you saved the woman you love, but she mistook you for Uchiha Kazuki, and even called out his name, what would you think?" Uchiha Obito was stunned. Just imagining that scene made him feel extremely depressed and heartbroken. "Women of our Uchiha clan are the proudest. Even if she is willing to sacrifice her life for you, she will never give up her self-esteem and live as a substitute for others." Uchiha Setsuna's tone was full of vicissitudes. "Uchiha women are the best. They dare to give everything for you. As long as you have her in your heart, she will belong to you alone for the rest of your life." Obito listened attentively, lost in his thoughts. A girl who belonged only to him, who was willing to sacrifice everything for him. It was too perfect to be true. In a vague way, Uchiha Obito felt that this might be a turning point in his life. But at that time, I really didn't know who he was. Obito still tried to justify himself, but thinking of Uchiha Rin's face that was tailor-made for him, Obito felt more and more guilty. His heart was pounding, and he became nervous. Why did he like Noara Rin so much? It was not only because of her beauty, but because she was the first person who made him feel cared for, important. But in reality, Noara Rin was a girl who was kind to everyone, and deep down in his heart, Obito had not left an indelible mark on her. But what about UCHIHA Rin? She wasn't just someone who had shown him sympathy. She was willing to sacrifice her life for him. As Obito was still lost in his thoughts, Setsuna's calm voice echoed again. Obito, some people and moments only happen once in a lifetime. If you let them go, they may be gone forever. By the time you realize it, it may already be too late to regret it. Boy, I hope you are not like me, who only understands this truth in tears. Uchiha Obito stared at Uchiha Setsuna blankly. Even though the old man had made all this up, it was obvious that it had shocked the heart of this lovelorn fool. Uchiha Setsuna suppressed a smile and patted Obito on the shoulder. Don't you understand, Obito? I just ask you, can you accept Uchiha Rin being with someone else? Obito blinked several times, processing the idea, and suddenly, he jumped like a spring. Setsuna clan elder, I apply for a day's suspension of practice. Go kid. Uchiha Setsuna stared at Uchiha Obito's running back and smiled, but the smile was a little cold. He knew that Obito needed that emotional bond. No great Uchiha had ever achieved success without losing a loved one, be it a brother, a friend, or a lover. If there is no Uchiha Rin, Uchiha Setsuna will also find a way to arrange one for Uchiha Obito. It's just that there is a ready-made one now. At Kazuki's house. Shursui, eyes wide open and an angry expression on his face, puffed out his cheeks as he sat down in front of Kazuki. Annoyed, he exclaimed, "Brother, I want to graduate early too." After Asuma received the news that both he and Kazuki had been approved to be on the same team, he excitedly headed to Kazuki's house and bought a lot of food to celebrate. At this moment, Shursui was reluctantly eating the snacks Asuma had brought, but in his heart he couldn't help but feel bitter. The son of Hokage is so great? He asked his parents to forcibly take away his brother. In Shursui's fantasy, Kazuki still has a great possibility of being in the same class with him. But the biggest force majeure from Konoha told the young Shursui what the Black Hand is. You better keep studying, Shursui. You still have a lot to learn. Kazuki said to Shursui with a smile, while stroking his head. Also, Guy will be your teammate. Isn't that okay? Shursui snorted. Guy is fine, but wouldn't it be better to have you as a partner? Kazuki shook his head and chuckled. Shursui at that moment saw how the 3 tomo of the Sharingan appeared in his brother's eyes. Let me see your eyes, Shursui. As Kazuki whispered, Shursui's Sharingan also emerged. But in front of Kazuki's pupil power, Shursui felt that he was like a small boat in the raging ocean and could only barely protect himself with the waves. Brother, when did you awaken to the 3rd tomo? Shursui looked at Kazuki in disbelief. His brother had always been with him, and he hadn't been stimulated mentally, so why did he awaken the 3rd tomo? Is this what a true genius is? When will I be able to catch up with my brother? Kazuki's eyes flickered, and the tomo of the Sharingan seemed to have a hypnotic power that trapped Shursui. Shursui, when you have eyes like mine, come and talk to your brother about this. Before that, just be a cute little brother. Kazuki deactivated his Sharingan, while Shursui, still stunned, sat processing what had happened. After a long time, Shursui finally came to his senses. His eyes became firm again. Brother, I won't let you wait too long. Kazuki touched Shursui's head, suppressed his smile. Shursui shook his head in anger and shouted, Brother, I will surpass you one day. Kazuki nodded perfunctorily. Okay. Shursui pursed his lips and glared at Kazuki with the fiercest look he could think of, like a husky trying to be serious, full of cuteness, and then ran back to the bedroom, looking very dissatisfied. From Uchiha Shursui's target, you have obtained the talent in the body flicker technique. Kazuki chuckled and looked at Shursui. His younger brother is the same as Uchiha Obito. After Kazuki obtained the talent from Shursui, all the capital he had was already revealed, and he was in urgent need of further growth. As a good brother, Kazuki chose to give Shursui a little pressure and motivation. Otherwise, how can Shursui continue to grow? And how can Kazuki get new rewards? Kazuki still has high expectations for Shursui, his own brother. Kazuki slowly got up, returned to the bedroom, and started interacting with Senju Tobirama. Tobirama, I'm about to report to your granddaughter. Do you have any suggestions? Senju Tobirama snorted coldly. Ever since he determined that Kazuki was the dual chakra reincarnation of him and Uchiha Izuna, Senju Tobirama's feelings for Kazuki were very complicated. Just make sure you value the trust the monkey has placed in you. Letting Tsuna be your master means more than when I let Kagami be my shadow guard. Thinking of Tsunade's depressed look, Senju Tobirama sighed unconsciously. However, Tobirama had a hunch. Perhaps Kazuki's arrival on Tsunade's team would change things. As for advice, you need to pay attention to your yang release training. Many young Uchiha who awaken the Sharingan tend to overload their body with the power of yin release, which can lead to physical exhaustion and, in some cases, bloodline diseases. Even if it does not endanger your life, it will limit your potential, and it will be difficult to have great development in the future. Tobirama stopped thinking about Tsunade and started worrying about Kazuki's body. Although he had seen Obito's 3-tomo Sharingan, he hadn't given it much thought. In Senju Tobirama's opinion, if there is no great opportunity, this extremely talented 3-tomo Sharingan will become a burden to Uchiha Obito, damaging his foundation, and it is hard to say whether he can live beyond the age of 20. What Tobirama didn't know was that Obito had the potential to become something much more sinister. Hey Tobirama, I'm asking you about Tsunade. Why are you concerned about my body? Kazuki glanced at Senju Tobirama suspiciously, and whispered, do you see that my Sharingan is improving too fast, and you want to find an excuse to slow down my progress? Don't worry, can't you use my eyes too? I won't be as stingy as you, use them if you want. Tobirama clenched his fist tightly. I am concerned about your health. Don't you understand, you little bastard? Just kidding, why are you so impatient? Kazuki raised his eyebrows and then yawned. For your sake, I will find a way to make Tsunade's life better. Good night, Tobirama. Senju Tobirama snorted coldly, as if he wanted to say something, but after a moment, he whispered, go to sleep, kid. And so the night passed in silence. The next day, in a training ground somewhere in Konoha, under the expedited procedures of a certain Hokage, Asuma, Kazuki and Noara Rin were exempted from the assessment and became glorious Konoha genin. In front of them, Tsunade, who was probably hungover the night before, was full of alcohol. She rubbed her head hard, yawned, glanced at her students, shook the bell on her waist, and perfunctorily ordered, little devils, do you see this bell? The first test is that you have to get it from me through teamwork. You can discuss it for a while, or you can try to sneak attack me, but when you make a move, the test will begin. Tsunade smiled subtly. If the test fails, you will all be eliminated, and I won't have to take care of you troublesome little devils. After that, Tsunade walked to the shade of the tree and fell asleep. Asuma was about to take the opportunity to make a move, but remembered Tsunade's warning. Was Tsunade really asleep, or was she just pretending to set a trap for them? Asuma's hands froze on the ninja bag, staring at Tsunade. A golden bell hung down from her waist, and in the breeze of the afternoon, it made a tinkling sound, like a peaceful lullaby, which calmed her mind unconsciously. Tsunade leaned under the shade of the tree. Her expression was very relaxed, and she seemed to have no guard at all, and she really fell asleep like this. And her hangover appearance and slight snoring made her seem defenseless. But even so, Asuma still didn't dare to act rashly. Even though everything Tsunade did seemed to contradict the shinobi code, she was still Tsunade, the third Hokage's apprentice, and a powerful kunoichi capable of taking on the demigod of the shinobi world. Any attack she made was not something a genin could withstand. Tsunade made it very clear what the consequences of failure would be. Asuma pondered over the countermeasures, and after a moment, he clapped his hands. Noara Rin looked at Asuma with surprise, who was full of confidence, and sighed inwardly. Asuma-kun is worthy of being the son of the Hokage. He has a plan in such a short time. Asuma ran to Kazuki in a flash and whispered, Kazuki, what do you think we should do? I'll listen to you. Noara Rin was stunned. Is this the solution you came up with? But then, she smiled knowingly and moved over briskly. Although Asuma's actions were funny, it was indeed the best choice. In their team, Kazuki was undoubtedly the strategic leader and the strongest in combat. Listening to Kazuki is definitely the most normal choice. Asuma, Kazuki said, patting him on the shoulder. I want to hear your opinion first. Looking him seriously in the eyes, he added, we are teammates, we share the same dreams, and in the future, we will trust our lives to each other on the battlefield. Your opinion is very important to me. Asuma's face immediately turned red. A mix of excitement and embarrassment washed over him. He was excited because Kazuki saw him as a reliable companion, someone who shared ideals. But he also felt ashamed, as he had once again forgotten Kazuki's lesson. Think harder. Taking a deep breath, Asuma concentrated, And after a few seconds of thought, he said slowly, I think Tsunade-sensei is trying to get us to lower our guard. I gathered information about her earlier. Her specialty is hand-to-hand combat using chakra-enhanced strength. She's able to destroy the ground with a single blow. She should be luring us to get closer. If we engage in close combat with Tsunade-sensei, it will be difficult for you, Kazuki, to withstand it, not to mention us, right? Noera-rin nodded in agreement and said softly, I think so too. Tsunade-sensei is probably testing our patience as shinobi. Kazuki narrowed his eyes and said slowly, Asuma-rin, what you said makes sense. Let me think about it. Asuma and Noera-rin fell silent immediately, looking at Kazuki with serious expressions, fearing that they would disturb his thinking. And Kazuki seemed to be thinking, but in fact, Tobirama, please help me. Kazuki plopped down next to Tobirama, looking at Tsunade in the distance. What do you think we should do? Tobirama chuckled, a crooked smile on his face. I'll give you some advice, brat. Think harder. Kazuki took a deep breath and maintained a stoic expression. Tobirama raised an eyebrow, amused, clearly enjoying the situation. The evil old ghost Senju has learned to steal other people's words. Kazuki grumbled in his mind, then nudged Tobirama. I say, you don't think I can't take her down, do you? I won't say I'm completely sure of defeating her in a head-on battle, but if it's just to take a bell, with my speed and ninjutsu, it's nothing to me. Senju Tobirama snorted coldly, but didn't refute anything. He knew that Kazuki was telling the truth. For Tobirama, Kazuki, as the reincarnation of himself and Uchiha Izuna, was at a level that few shinobi could reach. Even Hatake Tsukumo had failed to defeat Kazuki in a short time. Kazuki sighed and shook his head. Tobirama, you don't understand what I mean. You don't think I will be fooled by Tsunade's words? With the son of the Hokage here, as long as I don't smash your Hokage rock today, she will always find an excuse to accept us. Senju Tobirama's face darkened. He always felt that Kazuki was taking revenge on him for imitating his words just now. Although this example is very accurate, why does it sound so weird? Senju Tobirama felt that even if his Hokage rock was shattered, Asuma, the unfortunate child, would admit that he did it, let Sarutobi Hiruzen beat him up, and save Kazuki. Think about it, if I defeat Tsunade, what will she think? Kazuki sighed. You also heard what Asuma said during dinner that day. A woman who has lost her brother and relatives and is devastated. If she can't even beat the students of the ninja school, will she be more devastated? For example, to think that it was his weakness that prevented him from saving his loved ones? Senju Tobirama's eyes trembled. He really didn't think of this level. But after careful consideration, Senju Tobirama felt that what Kazuki said made sense. If Kazuki forcibly took the bell, with Tsunade's fragile mentality now, she would probably really start to doubt herself. Tsunade, she should really be asleep. Tobirama's gaze darkened as he looked at Tsunade, whose exhausted expression didn't disappear even in her sleep. But don't underestimate the enemy. Tsunade has the blood of the Uzumaki clan, and her perception ability will not be weak. Kazuki, what are you going to do? Even Tobirama, who was asked for advice, felt overwhelmed by the situation. Winning didn't seem like the best option, but losing didn't either. What were they supposed to do? Kazuki looked at Senju Tobirama with contempt and curled his lips. I was asking you. How come you're asking me now? Tobirama, do something useful for once. Tobirama looked away, visibly uncomfortable. As a straight man, Senju Tobirama was 80% sure of guessing Uchiha Izuna's next move, but guessing the thoughts of a fragile woman was really his blind spot. At the same time, a warm feeling surged in Senju Tobirama's heart. If he didn't have this relationship, would Kazuki still treat Tsunade so gently and carefully? Just snatch the bell. A kunoichi who is so fragile at heart can't expect others to understand her. This proves that Kazuki really took him seriously. Forget it, just tell me what food Tsunade likes, I have a way. Kazuki's eyes flickered. This time, just think of it as you owe me a favor, Tobirama. Senju Tobirama looked at Kazuki blankly. Kazuki, don't you think what we're doing is wrong? Will this plan really work? Asuma looked at Kazuki, who was smiling beside the stove. Just now. Kazuki asked Asuma and Rin a strange question. It's almost noon. Have you eaten anything since you got up this morning? In order to maintain good physical condition, the two of them had only eaten a little, waiting for Tsunade, who was arriving late, to join in. But they were already hungry. So Kazuki waved his hand and issued them a task and told them about the plan to take down Tsunade. Asuma became an errand boy and, in accordance with Kazuki's requirements, went to buy premium ingredients. Noera Rin was responsible for building the stove with Kazuki. While Tsunade was still fast asleep, Kazuki decided it was the perfect time to prepare some comforting hen broth for his team. And the hen broth prepared by Kazuki, according to Tobirama's instructions, was Tsunade's favorite dish when she was a child. "It's okay, Asuma," Kazuki said softly. "Tsunade-sensei said that when we take action, the assessment will officially begin. In other words, if we don't take action, the assessment will not begin. As a shinobi, the first priority is to fully understand the rules. Whether it is the rules of this assessment, or the rules in the village that are either explicit or implicit." Asuma's expression became serious. He always felt that Kazuki was teaching him something, but he didn't point it out and hoped that he would use his wisdom to further understand it. "Kazuki, I understand." Asuma nodded vigorously. "Anyway, I listened to you." Kazuki smiled, took the ingredients Asuma brought, and seeing his forehead covered in sweat, patted him on the shoulder. "Thank you for your hard work, Asuma. This boy was really peculiar. He has told Asuma countless times that he should think independently, think more, and not take him as the backbone. But the more he said this, the more Asuma relied on him, and the more he followed Kazuki's thinking." Kazuki slowly drew his Muramasa sword, the sharp blade flashing in the sunlight. Noera Rin and Asuma were both stunned. The swordsmanship from UCHIHA and Senju Tobirama was used to the extreme at this moment. With lightning speed, the flame-covered blade bled, plucked and cleaned the bird's entrails in a single movement. In the air, the clean hen traced an elegant curve. With a flick of his finger, Kazuki controlled a stream of water that appeared out of nowhere and washed the chicken in the air, removing all impurities. Senju Tobirama frowned as he watched this scene. "No, you're using my swordsmanship to kill hens and cook, aren't you? You little brat who's wasting the gifts of heaven. Although, wait, he's also using Izuna's technique, and it's to cook for Tsunade? Well, in that case, it's fine. Keep going, kid." Asuma and Rin were completely shocked. But it's not over yet. Kazuki's eyes flashed with 3 tomo of the Sharingan, as he accurately threw the rest of the ingredients into the pot using the Uchiha throwing technique, embedding himself into the hen. With his Sharingan, Kazuki controlled the temperature of the fire with chakra, lighting the stove immediately. While he observed with the Sharingan the exact point at which the meat reached its cooking point, he used his ability in fire release to intensify the integration of the flavors of the ingredients with the meat. Senju Tobirama unconsciously raised the corners of his mouth and couldn't hide his smile as he watched Kazuki prepare the food. Uchiha Izuna's fire release and throwing techniques are quite amazing. So what? That was used by Kazuki to cook. From this point of view, Uchiha Izuna's chakra has little influence on Kazuki. Senju Tobirama subconsciously forgot that his water release was also used to wash the hen just now. The red light in Kazuki's eyes flashed, his hands trembled, and the seasonings were put in one by one in a very methodical manner. The fire in his hands seemed to come to life, spreading evenly across the bottom of the pot, maintaining the ideal temperature. With such luxurious methods, in a short time a chicken soup was completed, the intoxicating aroma of which filled the air. Asuma and Rin, unable to help themselves, gulped at the scent of the fragrance. "Kazuki, this soup you made. Not even my old man has ever tasted something so luxurious. The way you prepared it is a waste for anyone else." Asuma commented, inhaling the aroma, completely forgetting about Tsunade in the distance. All he wished was to be able to help himself to a generous portion of Kazuki's creation. Kazuki waved his hand. "What's luxury? Whether it's fire release, kenjutsu, pupil technique or other ninjutsu, these powers are the vassal of the shinobi, used to make the people close to them live comfortably. In my opinion, the 3 tomo Sharingan can kill the enemy and make a bowl of hen soup for friends. Both are equally important." Asuma and Noera Rin felt warm in their hearts. Before they even ate the real soup, Kazuki's spiritual chicken soup made them feel comfortable. "Okay, you can start eating." Kazuki slowly lifted the lid of the pot. At this moment, Asuma and Noera Rin seemed to see dazzling golden light bursting out of the hen soup, but when they looked closely, the golden light disappeared. Kazuki smiled on the side. If there were no special effects, how could the specifications of this hen soup be justified? Kazuki exhaled slowly. The gentle breeze wrapped in the fragrance blew to Tsunade's side. Tsunade closed her eyes and twitched her nose unconsciously. She drank too much yesterday and had not eaten yet. Her stomach was already empty and needed some warm food to fill it. Tsunade gradually sobered up, opened her eyes and looked at the blue sky and white clouds in front of her, and sighed. She no longer had the heart to cook for herself. When she was sad, she would drink. If she drank too much, she would vomit. If she vomited and got hurt, she would use medical ninjutsu to heal her. This was the best cycle for people to forget the past. Hen soup. Am I still dwelling on the past subconsciously? I am such a weak woman. Tsunade laughed at herself, sat up slowly, and began to look for Kazuki and others. Her original plan had been to just lie there and let Kazuki and the others come closer, quickly capture them, like Asuma had suggested. After all, how could a kid from the ninja school resist such an opportunity? But when Tsunade looked up, she saw Kazuki looking at her with a smile, waving at her. Tsunade-sensei, the hen soup is just made, come and have a bowl. Tsunade stared at Kazuki blankly. Staring at Kazuki's face in the sun, her vision seemed a little blurry. Tsunade stared at Kazuki not far away. She didn't know why, but the image of her second grandfather appeared in Tsunade's eyes, always calm, wise, and extremely kind. But it was just an illusion for a moment. Kazuki's face, which was very characteristic of the Uchiha handsome man, broke Tsunade's strange sense of déjà vu. She blinked, and looking at Kazuki, who was wearing the Uchiha clan uniform, she let out a light laugh. In a trance, Tsunade remembered the story that Senju Tobirama told her in her childhood, about his nemesis Uchiha Izuna. At this moment, Kazuki looked like the Uchiha Izuna described in the story. Although Tsunade smiled, a slight sadness and loneliness filled her heart. Who could she share these stories with? All her loved ones had already left. Her grandmother, the only one left, would soon also reach the end of her life, and the last arrangements had to be made. Tsunade walked slowly towards Kazuki, and the aroma of hen soup became more and more rich along the way, causing her empty stomach to churn. Although Tsunade wanted to criticize Kazuki's boldness, this was a serious apprenticeship exam, but looking at the pot of hen soup, she could tell it was not ordinary. She swallowed her throat, nodded honestly, and said, "It's okay to eat something before the test." Asuma and Noera-rin held back their laughter. Although Tsunade looked very resistant, her slightly heavier breathing betrayed her inner feelings. This amazing kunoichi must be very hungry now. Kazuki smiled and picked up the big spoon, filled a bowl with ingredients for Tsunade, and handed it to her. "Eat it while it's hot, Tsunade-sensei." Tsunade turned her head and stared at Kazuki's face. For some reason, she felt that strange sense of familiarity again. It was as if Kazuki's face, typical of the Uchiha, hid Tobirama's features, and his aura increased that perception. If Kazuki was not from the Uchiha clan, if someone told Tsunade that Kazuki and Senju Tobirama had some special relationship, she would even believe it a little bit. Tsunade took the slightly hot bowl of soup, and these distracting thoughts in her mind flashed away with the aroma, and her appetite suddenly became strong. She was really hungry. Kazuki poured bowls for Asuma, Rin, and himself, one by one. On that sunny morning, Tsunade's team, even though they hadn't passed the test, already seemed like a family, sharing a comforting meal. A team of 4 people, at that moment, seemed like a harmonious team. Itadakimasu. Kazuki picked up the bowl of soup and said with a smile, "Itadakimasu." Noera-rin and Asuma responded very familiarly. They had gone to Kazuki's house many times to receive free meals, so they were particularly familiar, which made the scene feel a little warm. Tsunade took a deep breath. She hadn't seen such a scene for a long time. Her last memories were of noisy bar tables and casinos filled with shouting and cursing. But here, sitting quietly on a grassy field, sans alcohol and enjoying a bowl of hot soup, Tsunade thought that perhaps she would never have this experience again. Tsunade slowly picked up the spoon and whispered, "Itadakimasu." As soon as they tasted the soup, Tsunade, Rin, and Asuma began to enjoy it, shaking their heads in satisfaction. For a moment, the 3 of them were immersed in their food. Senju Tobirama watched this scene silently, and the worried expression faded a little. Seeing Tsunade drink the soup so enthusiastically, Tobirama felt comforted. At this moment, he didn't want to blame Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyesight. Even if he was deceived by Kazuki a little, it didn't matter. Otherwise, how could Tsunade and Kazuki be arranged in the same team? Moreover, Tobirama's heart filled with warmth. seeing how the vulnerable Tsunade was treated with such tenderness. Wasn't that a sign of respect for him? Kazuki glanced at the bell on Tsunade's waist, smiled, and gave Asuma and Noera-rin a look. As Tsunade finished, every last drop of soup her eyes drifted to the pot, wanting more but not daring to ask for it. At this time, Asuma raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself, "Why is the old man here? I clearly told him not to come. It's so annoying." Noera-rin also showed a proper expression of surprise, as well as the excitement that every genin should have when seeing the Hokage. Tsunade followed Asuma's gaze and looked back. The old man is here too. But she didn't see Sarutobi Hiruzen. When Tsunade turned her head, she already had a new bowl of soup in her hands. But Kazuki's hand had already covered the bell she wore on her waist, and he held it in his palm. Tsunade was stunned for a moment, and heard Kazuki say with a smile, "Tsunade-sensei, I've made my move." Just as Tsunade said, the assessment started when Kazuki and others took the initiative to take action. But this movement meant the end. Tsunade's expression changed, and she was angry and amused. "Little demon, can you really call this a ninja strategy? Tsunade-sensei, this is a teamwork between me, Asuma, and Rin. Didn't we do a good job?" Kazuki pointed at the somewhat shy Noera-rin and the smug Asuma, and said softly, "Without their help, the soup would only have filled your stomach, but it wouldn't have made you turn your head." Tsunade snorted. What a group of cunning little devils. With such a vicious mind, they actually used soup to deal with a drunk with a hangover. "If it gets cold, it won't taste as good anymore," Kazuki commented, raising his bowl and toasting with Asuma and Rin, celebrating their small victory. Ignoring Tsunade's complex expression, he clinked his bowl with hers as well. "This bowl of delicious soup is also our teamwork, Tsunade-sensei. You must cherish the fruits of our labor." Tsunade narrowed her eyes, and after a moment, she sighed. "I reluctantly give them a pass." Immediately, she raised the bowl in her hand and said generously, "I officially announce that Team Tsunade is formed. Cheers! Even though you all passed the test." Tsunade said with a satisfied smile as she stretched, enjoying the warmth the food provided to her body. However, her gaze turned dangerous. "We're not done with the matter of tricking your sensei yet. Team Tsunade's first training session is about to begin. The content of the test is to protect the bells in your hands well." Tsunade pointed at Kazuki and immediately raised a finger. "You have 1 minute to prepare. Shinobi must respond to emergencies anytime and anywhere." Asuma jumped up and complained viciously, "Isn't this a bit excessive?" But seeing Tsunade's gaze, Asuma immediately fell silent, scratching his head with a nervous smile. He wasn't at home, where his father would perhaps punish him with a couple of spankings that would only hurt for a day. The next day, with some effort, he could get up as if nothing had happened. But with Tsunade's explosive temper, which Asuma had heard about, things were different. After all, Jiraiya had suffered multiple rib fractures at the hands of Tsunade. Tsunade shook her head and snorted. "Don't think I'm retaliating for what you did, brats. Your soup trick may have been effective, but it's nothing more than a bit of cleverness. The battlefield is a ruthless and cruel place. Only strength can protect yourself. The more adorable the little shinobi are, the crueler the blow they receive. Instead of being killed instantly by a powerful enemy, let me, your sensei, let you experience the huge gap between the jonin and the genin first." Tsunade's tone was very serious, with a hint of grief and sadness in her expression. Although she was beginning to accept her team, her thoughts were filled with the tragic memories of her life. Tsunade had decided that if she took these students in, then she would strictly teach them how to survive. This is what Tsunade thinks now. She cared for them. Being kind and lovable was fine, but in the cruel world of shinobi, those traits would only increase the pain of their loved ones when they died. "There are still 15 seconds. You have to prepare quickly." Tsunade, arms crossed, watched as Asuma and Rin whispered to each other, increasing the pressure on them. When the time Tsunade gave them to prepare was up, Asuma and Rin dispersed, leaving only Kazuki standing in front of Tsunade. He held the bell he had taken from Tsunade's waist, dangling it from his index finger. With a smile, he said, "Tsunade-sensei, please teach me." At this moment, the situation seemed to be reversed. Kazuki, with his relaxed air, didn't look like a genin about to be hunted, but rather an examiner, while Tsunade resembled a student participating in a test to snatch the bell. Asuma stood in the distance, looking at Kazuki's figure with admiration and solemnity, and clenched his fists hard. Fighting against Tsunade-sensei, I have to admit that I am a burden to Kazuki. But it won't be too long. I will definitely catch up with Kazuki as soon as possible. Tsunade, seeing Kazuki's carefree attitude, laughed as she crossed her arms and said, "Brat, don't think that because you made a good soup I'm going to treat you with indulgence. On the contrary, I will give you special treatment." In an instant, Tsunade launched herself forward. The force in her feet shattered the rock beneath her, raising a cloud of dust. Asuma and Rin stared at this scene in amazement. With that level of power, if she had attacked them, the fight would have been over in the blink of an eye. Kazuki, for his part, narrowed his eyes. His Sharingan was analyzing Tsunade's movements with precision. He shook his head and even had the leisure to comment with Senju Tobirama. "Tsunade's speed is still behind Hatake Tsukumo." Senju Tobirama rolled his eyes. "Tsunade and Hatake Tsukumo are competing in speed? This kid can say that. Do you think everyone is like you? At this age, he has gathered the talents of Uchiha Izuna and him." Tsunade rushed to Kazuki, but what came into view was a pair of deep 3-tomo Sharingan. The tomo spun, radiating a mysterious aura. Tsunade was immediately startled. She would never have imagined that Kazuki possessed a 3-tomo Sharingan. "Boy, don't underestimate me." Tsunade quickly put her hands together, and a large amount of chakra burst out from her body. Chakra enhanced strength. Chakra release. With chakra flowing through her body, Tsunade accelerated again. Although Kazuki seemed to be relying on his Sharingan, he didn't expect Tsunade to be able to so easily break the control of his eyes, leaving him in a completely disadvantageous position. Tsunade smiled. First, she had underestimated Kazuki, and that put her at a disadvantage. But from her perspective, Kazuki had also failed to properly assess what it meant to face a Kaga-level shinobi, which turned the tables again. Asuma and Rin watched this scene nervously, not even daring to breathe. Tsunade grabbed the bell in Kazuki's hand and said, "I got you, kid." But the sound of the bell rang behind Tsunade. Kazuki patted Tsunade's shoulder from behind and said with a smile, "Tsunade-sensei, when did you get the misconception that you could resist the power of the 3-tomo Sharingan? When did this genjutsu come about?" Tsunade's body froze, and her eyes widened unconsciously. She thought that at Kazuki's age, any Uchiha who awakened the 3-tomo Sharingan would be arrogant by nature, believing that power was everything, and forgetting that there is always someone stronger in the world. But now, she realized that she herself had fallen into that pattern of thinking. Seeing the scene, Asuma waved his fist excitedly, unable to contain his excitement, and exclaimed, "This is Kazuki. This is Kazuki's strength." I knew that the old man's student couldn't compare to Kazuki. Rin fell into silence awkwardly. Asuma could say those things, but most of the shinobi in the village couldn't, including her, who was an ordinary kunoichi. However, the surprise she felt inside was the same as Asuma's. From her perspective, the situation was completely under Kazuki's control, and his opponent was none other than the legendary Tsunade Haim. Could it be that Kazuki's strength had already? As if responding to Noera Rin's doubts, Tsunade turned around at a very fast speed, wrapped a little chakra around her fist, and hit Kazuki fiercely. The movement was even faster than before. Kazuki glanced at Tsunade's fist, and did not choose to dodge, but wrapped chakra around his fist as well, and faced it head-on. Tsunade's face changed immediately, but the inertia brought by the huge force made her unable to stop, and she could only shout anxiously, "Kazuki kid, get out of the way." But Kazuki's fist was still moving forward. So, the two fists collided head-on. The collision of the enormous forces caused the ground to tremble slightly. Asuma and Rin, stunned, struggled to stay on their feet as they watched the scene in disbelief. Dust flew everywhere, and the ground cracked. Kazuki took a few steps back and looked down at the bell he was holding, shattered by the force of both of them. Slowly, he let it fall and said, "Tsunade-sensei, it seems I've lost." Kazuki moved his wrist. Although Tsunade did not use all her strength in this punch, the powerful force still made his wrist feel sore. "Your granddaughter's strength seems to be much stronger than yours, Tobirama." Kazuki teased with a smile. After all, his strength came from Senju Tobirama. "Little one, Tsunade's talent with monster strength could even match my older brother's. You still have a long way to go," Tobirama replied, a glint in his eyes. Although he usually argued with Kazuki, he couldn't help but feel a little scared inside. Is he telling the truth? Yes. Tsunade's chakra level and control of chakra are both top-notch. She is a Senju who has mastered monster strength. But the problem was that Tsunade already had a fully developed body, at the peak of her potential as a shinobi. Kazuki's talent, on the other hand, was just beginning to reveal itself. Although Tsunade didn't use her full strength in that blow, Kazuki probably didn't either. After that collision, Kazuki had only taken a few steps back, and his wrist was still able to move with some ease. Tobirama couldn't help but wonder about Kazuki's future. This boy has the potential to be as great as my older brother Senju Hashirama. Tsunade, for her part, also looked in amazement at Kazuki, who was rubbing his wrist. She had already prepared a plan to save Kazuki if something went wrong. Even Jiraiya, if he dared to take one of her blows with half of her strength, would surely end up with at least one broken bone. There was no doubt that the fusion of the Tobirama and Madara bloodlines had resulted in something much stronger than anyone could have imagined. Tsunade frowned and, with great seriousness, quickly walked over to take Kazuki's wrist and examine it carefully. After a while, Tsunade raised her head with a complicated look. "Little boy, you are really not simple." Today's entrance examination made Tsunade completely understand what kind of genius Sarutobi Hiruzen gave her. Perfectly mastered body flicker technique in Genjutsu, the 3-Tomo Sharingan, and an exceptional physical constitution, even by the standards of the Senju clan. Most interestingly, despite his strength being unknown to most, Kazuki was most famous for his interpretation of the will of fire. That perfect test he had handed in had already become a model for the teachers of the ninja school to use in class for their students. And that soup that had warmed her from head to toe had also shown Tsunade another side of Kazuki. Tsunade took a deep breath and said seriously, "However, I want you to know something. Your strength is still not enough, and it is not time to relax. Every veteran jonin of any village has a secret technique as a trump card. If I meet an enemy like you on the battlefield, I would summon Katsuyu to alter the terrain on a large scale and attack with long-range ninjutsu. With targeted tactics, you will still face a very dangerous situation." Tsunade said seriously, "I'll tell you a secret. I have a technique that can double my power in combat. So you still have to be humble and cautious. Shinobi are extremely fragile. Whether they are jonin or geniuses, a kunai or a detonating talisman can take your life when you relax." Even though Kazuki's talent is extremely outstanding, Tsunade at this moment is still emphasizing the cruelty of the battlefield. This woman's heart has been hurt too thoroughly by the endless separation. She didn't want to miss the chance to share Kazuki's soup again. Kazuki nodded obediently and said softly, "I understand, Tsunade-sensei. I know that I am just an ordinary person, far from being a genius." Tsunade was stunned for a moment, nodded awkwardly, and barely followed Kazuki's words. "Ah yes, an ordinary person, right? I heard that you are interested in water release. I will give you some of my second grandfather's techniques. Study them well, and when you learn them, you will probably be a qualified chunin." Tsunade talked nonsense. Looking at the resentful eyes of Asuma and Rin who came over, she couldn't hold it back. Kazuki's humility was beyond Tsunade's expectations. "This is called an ordinary person, right? Aren't you from the UCHIHA clan? Why don't you have the energy to be arrogant at all?" Okay, you barely passed the test." Tsunade quickly skipped this embarrassing topic and waved her hand. "I declare that the Tsunade team is officially established." Asuma and Rin cheered, and Kazuki also laughed. From this moment on, Kazuki officially entered the Hokage system and became a member of the core circle of Konoha. As a genin team, the tasks that can be taken on are roughly between C-level and D-level, and the content is nothing more than delivering express delivery, finding cats, handling sundries, etc. The most difficult is to deliver some confidential documents. Only the B-level tasks that chunin usually take on begin to involve combat issues. In the past 3 months, Tsunade led Kazuki, Asuma and Rin, starting from the D-level tasks. Asuma, who had just completed the task of finding the cat, sighed with dissatisfaction and muttered, "Tsunade-sensei, there is no need for us to continue this kind of task, right? We are the future geniuses and elites, the pillars of Konoha." Tsunade raised her eyebrows, and Asuma, who was complaining, immediately stopped talking and raised his hands to show that he had no objection. Other people may be more polite to Asuma, but Tsunade recently taught him a truth with her actions. The son of the Hokage, she can deal with it as she wants. "What do you think, Kazuki? Are you also tired of these low-level tasks?" Tsunade looked at Kazuki sideways. Unlike the somewhat impatient Asuma, Kazuki seemed to have no resentment towards these complicated low-level tasks, and even had a feeling of enjoying it. Kazuki shook his head, with a smile on his face. Tsunade-sensei, the recent missions have been simple, but thanks to that, most of the shinobi in the village already know that we are your disciples. Furthermore, everyone knows the harmonious atmosphere of our team. Team Tsunade has made its official debut in Konoha. On these missions, Tsunade had not just let Kazuki and the others work alone, but actively participated. Although there were sometimes arguments, the atmosphere was always surprisingly harmonious. In this way, all of Konoha had realized Tsunade had formed her own team. And it was not just another team, but one in which she really dedicated herself to teaching and accompanying her disciples, creating a strong bond between them. This kind of impact was nothing compared to completing high-level missions. It was something invaluable in Konoha, something that even multiple S-rank missions couldn't match. Kazuki, you little brat, you see it clearly. Tsunade snorted lightly, rubbed Kazuki's head, and smiled with satisfaction when she saw Kazuki frowning slightly. The reason Tsunade took them on low-level missions was to make them visible in the village, showing everyone that her disciples had her complete trust and support, and making it clear that no one was to mess with them. Therefore, Tsunade's team has been a hot topic recently among the high-level officials and shinobi circles of Konoha. Tsunade leads the team, and the members are a genius Uchiha, the son of the Hokage, and a talented civilian medical nin. The setting can be described as luxurious and reasonable. This lineup looks like the future Hokage, Hokage assistants, and Konoha consultants. Be it Ino Shikacho, a loyal supporter of the third Hokage, or the two advisors of Konoha, or even the Uchiha clan, or shinobi with a bit of insight and sensitivity, they all smelled the scent of power from the composition of this team. But I want to tell you that the happy time of doing odd jobs is over. Tsunade's expression became serious, and she said slowly, as a shinobi, from the moment you put on the forehead protector, you must be prepared to kill and for others to want to kill you. Killing is not the same as training. When you pierce an enemy's chest with a kunai or destroy their limbs with ninjutsu, that feeling is something you have to get used to over time. I will soon assign you a mission to exterminate some bandits. There are many enemies, and you will have to kill them one by one with your own hands. Kazuki Asuma Rin. You must adapt to the life of a shinobi as soon as possible and harden your hearts in the face of death. After finishing, Tsunade looked uncomfortable and quickly said, "Get ready." Immediately, she left with heavy steps, skipping the usual team meal they had had for the past few months. Asuma looked at Tsunade's back and snorted. Kazuki, Tsunade-sensei underestimates us. It's only our first combat mission. Rin gently shook her head and whispered, Asuma-kun, this really is an important step. Even many experienced jonin suffer trauma on the battlefield. Kazuki stared at Tsunade's figure and laughed inwardly. This woman truly saw him as her disciple. Despite her phobia of blood, she was determined to guide them in this essential lesson for all shinobi. No matter how much you prepare yourself by training with dummies, when the real thing comes, if you haven't gone through the proper mental process, you're bound to falter. So, to perform at your best on the battlefield, you have to get used to having blood on your hands beforehand. Kazuki shook his head with emotion, said goodbye to Asuma and Noera Rin, and walked towards the Uchiha clan. And in the Uchiha clan, the discussion about Kazuki has become the hottest topic in recent days. An Uchiha working alongside the Hokage's son and being trained by Tsunade. The high-level admission ticket that the Uchiha clan wanted for decades was actually obtained by Kazuki so easily? Is the will of fire really so useful? Many Uchiha clan members, after seeing the amazing treatment given to Kazuki by Sarutobi Hiruzen, pinched their noses and glanced at the will of fire textbooks of the ninja school, trying to see something from it. But even with the Sharingan, it was still incomprehensible gibberish. However, the internal turmoil within the Uchiha clan could no longer be avoided. Kazuki's name was constantly mentioned in conversations. And at this moment, in the home of Uchiha Yashiro, sitting in the main seat with an air of superiority, looked down on Uchiha Tetsuhi and Uchiha Kamahai, who were both smiling forcibly. Lifting his sake cup, he took a long drink before speaking slowly. So, have you understood what kind of person Kazuki is? I still remember that when Kazuki brought that Noera Rin to the clan land, you two wanted to cause trouble. Why do you still want to do it now? I stopped you two at that time. Didn't you complain to me afterwards? Yashiro slammed the table and let out an arrogant laugh. Come on, talk. Tetsuhi and Kamahai looked at each other, scratched their heads awkwardly, and smiled. Haha, Yashiro Aniki, look at what you said. Although there was a misunderstanding at the time, didn't we still listen to you? Fortunately, there was no trouble. Yashiro snorted coldly, looked at the empty cup and pursed his lips. Kamahai, understanding the gesture, took the jug of sake and carefully filled his cup, showing him respect. The truth is, if it hadn't been for Yashiro stopping them from acting at that moment, they would have had a direct conflict with Kazuki. And that could have been disastrous. In the Uchiha clan, the difference between the so-called hawks and doves is how to obtain a high-level position in Konoha. The hawks advocated using a tough attitude to intimidate Konoha, demanding that the village return the high-level seats and other benefits that the Uchiha clan deserved. The doves believed that the Uchiha clan had no allies, and that a tough attitude could not deter Konoha, but would only have a counter-effect and be further suppressed, and further planning was needed. From the perspective of Yashiro, Tetsuhi, and Kamahai, three of the top members of the Hawk faction, although Kazuki's actions seemed closer to Konoha's higher-ups and distant from a Hawk attitude, that didn't matter. The important thing was the result. Even these die-hard Uchiha Hawks had to admit that Sarutobi Hiruzen's impact this time was astonishing. If the third Hokage had offered such benefits to the Uchiha years ago, any Hawk would have been the first to prevent any revolt within the clan. Why was the Uchiha clan always in conflict with Konoha? Because after more than 20 years working in the Konoha police, they saw no possibility of promotion. But now, with Kazuki's arrival, there was hope. Tetsuhi and Kamahai also began to relax, drinking happily as the conversation flowed. Yashiro Aniki, how far do you think Kazuki will go in the future? Tetsuhi asked, his face flushed from the alcohol, daydreaming. I think he'll at least become a Konoha advisor. I even see him as an assistant to the Hokage. Kamahai nodded fervently, admiring Kazuki. I really admire Kazuki, who has reached such a height just by learning the will of fire. Hearing this, Yashiro frowned. Tetsuhi and Kamahai both seemed to think that Kazuki won the favor of Sarutobi Hiruzen just by relying on the will of fire. Before Yashiro could say anything, Tetsuhi sighed and said with a hint of worry, Yashiro, although Kazuki has reached that position, he doesn't have a deep relationship with our Uchiha clan. I'm worried that he will forget us clan members who are connected to him by blood. Kamahai also nodded. Yeah, maybe we should prepare for the worst. After all, the shinobi world still speaks with strength. The little guy Obito who appeared in the clan recently has opened the 3-tomo Sharingan at a young age. His future is limitless. Also, I think that leader Fugaku and elder Setsuna seem to have some opinions about Kazuki. Uchiha Yashiro sneered disdainfully. 3-tomo Sharingan? Although it is indeed very rare. But Uchiha Yashiro will never forget that day in his life. Kazuki seemed to be a fusion of Uchiha Izuna and Senju Tobirama. The combination of Kenjutsu with fire release and water release brought this 3-tomo veteran to his knees and even caused him to hallucinate. And after all that, Kazuki had treated him with compassion, healing his wounds. I'll tell you something. Yashiro slapped the table and said something that Tetsuhi and Kamahai couldn't understand. Kazuki's strength is not something you can guess. A genius with 3-tomo sounds rare, but can you imagine an Uchiha who is a combination of Izuna-sama and Senju Tobirama? Tetsuhi and Kamahai looked at each other in confusion. What was he talking about? Had he had too much to drink? How could it be possible for Izuna-sama and Tobirama to combine? If Izuna-sama heard this, he would probably jump out of his grave. Yashiro ignored their incredulous stares, clenching his fists as he remembered Kazuki's disappointment towards the clan, though he had still treated him kindly. What's reputation? As a typical sentimental Uchiha who knows how to repay kindness, Uchiha Yashiro has already given half of his life to Kazuki in his heart. Even if he tells his own ugly deeds, it doesn't matter as long as he can clear Kazuki's name. Take a look. Uchiha Yashiro tore open his shirt fiercely, revealing his upper body. Tetsuhi and Kamahai were shocked, looking at the dense and horrible scars and burn marks on Yashiro's body. This is the injury I suffered a few months ago, all caused by Kazuki. Uchiha Yashiro took a deep breath and slowly recounted the true scene of his fight with Kazuki that day. Tetsuhi and Kamahai listened in fascination. When Yashiro talked about why Kazuki mastered the will of fire and planned to lead the clan into silence, Tetsuhi and Kamahai's expressions turned heavy. When talking about Kazuki's disappointment in the clan because of Yashiro's provocation, even though the two knew the approximate result, there was a trace of inevitable panic in their eyes. Now, do you understand? Kazuki is not just another user of the 3-tomo Sharingan, or even the Mangekyo. He is a being sent by the heavens to save the Uchiha clan. Tetsuhi and Kamahai nodded repeatedly. They finally understood the true value of the name Kazuki. But soon, their gazes towards Yashiro turned strange. So, it was you who provoked Kazuki first? Uchiha Yashiro ignored the two's playful expressions and said with a stern face. Anyway, Fugaku is an indecisive leader, unable to exercise his authority. How is he going to lead the Uchiha clan? Uchiha Setsuna, this old guy, is even more extreme and outrageous. Apart from shouting that he has the will of Madara, he has not accomplished anything in all these years. The future of the Uchiha clan is in Kazuki's hands, and only in his will it be safe. Tetsuhi and Kamahai adopted serious expressions. It seemed like it was time to make a decision. Without thinking too much, they both nodded seriously. You can tell my experience to those clan members who have misunderstandings about Kazuki secretly. Remember, find those clan members you trust and have opened your eyes, and quietly build a team for him in the clan while keeping it as confidential as possible. Uchiha Yashiro slammed the table and said, Kazuki is struggling with the top leaders of Konoha. We should do something for him. Konoha. At a tavern, the members of Team Sarutobi reunited after a long time. Jiraiya raised his glass excitedly, taking a long drink. Tsunade Orochimaru, we three haven't gathered together for a long time. I've already talked to the old man. Once we're done with Mito-sama, I'll be off to explore the shinobi world in search of the child of the prophecy. I don't know when we'll be able to see each other again. Orochimaru sneered, holding the cup elegantly with his fingers, took a sip and said slowly, You are really an idiot, Jiraiya. You plan to use your own life to prove the prophecy of the toad. Do you like to waste your life? Jiraiya shrugged indifferently and looked at Orochimaru with contempt. What do you know? The great toad sage is said to have talked with the six-path sage. Orochimaru said coldly, It's just a toad. For Orochimaru, even if he had to respectfully call the Lord of Ryuchi Cave the White Snake Sage, in his eyes, a beast is still a beast even if it can speak human language. Especially when it came to something as vague as the child of the prophecy, something that only made Orochimaru even more distrustful of Mount Mayaboku. A mere summoned beast could judge the fate of mankind? In his opinion, only an idiot like Jiraiya would believe it unconditionally. As Jiraiya's friend, Orochimaru had already persuaded him in his own way. But it was obvious that Jiraiya didn't listen. Jiraiya, after exchanging a few insults with Orochimaru after the latter mocked the great toad sage, then turned to Tsunade. Hey Tsunade, tell us what you think. It's the great toad sage's prophecy, for heaven's sake. Tsunade waved her hand. I have the same opinion as Orochimaru. If the prophecy is useful, then you don't have to look for the child of prophecy. Anyway, won't everything it says happen? Although I am an unfortunate person, I don't want to believe that fate cannot be changed. If that's the case, what's the meaning of life? Orochimaru looked at Tsunade in surprise. Such philosophical words don't sound like what you said. Stinky snake, what do you know? Tsunade glanced at Orochimaru. Compared to Jiraiya, this absolute idiot, you should be more careful. I heard that you and Shimura Danzo have been mixed up recently. The old man won't want to see this. You are the future fourth Hokage of the village. You still have to pay attention to your image. Shimura Danzo, that old guy, is not a good person. It's better to have less contact with him. Hokage? It's just a boring position. I'd rather do whatever I want. Orochimaru replied with a disinterested air, although his words hit a certain bad mood. As the sharp blade in Sarutobi Hiruzen's hand, Orochimaru remembered Hatake Tsukumo's attitude towards him that day. This shows that his teacher has begun to criticize him. With the human experiments he had already begun to secretly conduct, his desire to achieve immortality had begun to burn brightly within him. Orochimaru no longer felt limited by Konoha. He preferred to be a missing nin rather than a puppet of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, looked at Tsunade for a few times, and said slowly, Let's not talk about my business for now, Tsunade. You seem to be in better shape recently. Are you no longer indulging in sadness and pain? Tsunade at this moment is completely different from the drunken look a few months ago. The whole person looks alive, and there is light in her eyes. Jiraiya nodded and followed Orochimaru's words and said, I heard that the old man asked you to train his son and a brat from the Uchiha clan. Are you doing well with them? Orochimaru's eyes flashed. If Sarutobi Hiruzen supported him to be the Hokage, then Kazuki and Asuma's teacher should be him. Choosing Tsunade as the teacher of this special class does not mean that Sarutobi Hiruzen wants her to be the Hokage. After all, it is impossible for the Kage of a village to have a weakness like hemophobia, but it is enough to see Sarutobi Hiruzen's inner thoughts. Orochimaru is no longer the next Hokage that Sarutobi Hiruzen firmly supports in his heart, and has been included in the ranks of inspection. Those children are all pretty good. Tsunade's eyes showed a trace of tenderness. The past few months of getting along with Kazuki made her feel the fulfillment of life for the first time in a long time. It seems that you have a few good students, Tsunade. Jiraiya laughed and boasted. However, any young shinobi will look mediocre compared to my student Namake's Minato. If you can't handle the Hokage's son and the Uchiha well, I can ask Minato to show them what it means to be a true genius. Orochimaru sighed silently, speechless at Jiraiya's stupidity. Clearly, those students were the reason Tsunade had recovered, and instead of supporting her, he only bragged about Minato. It was no wonder he had never been able to win her heart. As expected, Tsunade stood up abruptly and with a cold smile said, "A genius? Very well, after my students see some blood, I'll be happy to have Minato teach them a lesson. Let's go." Tsunade stood up suddenly and left the tavern in a hurry. Jiraiya looked at Tsunade's departing back blankly, scratching his head in confusion. Orochimaru, why do I feel that Tsunade's mood seems to be a little off? Orochimaru slowly drank the remaining sake in the cup and stood up and walked towards the door. Don't think too much about it, Jiraiya. Go find your child of prophecy. That's the whole reason for your existence. The three people who were sitting together just now, in the blink of an eye, only Jiraiya was left. The three companions who had shared so many adventures together now went their separate ways. As they grew up, each had their own nest and their own goals, drifting further and further apart. The next day, the border of the Land of Fire. Little devils, there are hundreds of bandits in this valley. Tsunade folded her arms and gave orders ruthlessly. Today's assessment is to completely eliminate these bandits, leaving no one alive. Unbeknownst to them, those bandits had also been marked by someone else. The most lethal bounty hunter in the shinobi world was heading to the same valley from another direction. The exit of the valley. Asuma couldn't get the scene where he had just killed out of his mind. As he tried to control the nervousness inside him, he turned his head and began to wipe away the blood residue on his chakra knife, his stomach twisting slightly. Rin, who was beside him, looked even worse than Asuma, who at least seemed more composed. Rin's face was completely pale. Only Kazuki still had that gentle expression. Muramesa's blade burned away the blood under the burning flames, as if nothing had happened. Tsunade sniffed the bloody smell all over the mountains, and her heartbeat gradually accelerated, as if she was back on the battlefield, back to the hell that had deprived her of everything she cherished. But even with the burden of hemophobia, Tsunade was still responsible. When Kazuki and others faced hundreds of bandits, she was steadily guarding them from behind to avoid any unexpected situations. As long as the blood did not splash directly on her body and the blood was not too close to her, Tsunade could still control her mind. This was an improvement over before. Before Tsunade met Kazuki, her hemophobia was much more serious than it is now. Although, there was no accident at all. When Kazuki killed the bandits, she was like a butterfly on the battlefield, gorgeous and elegant, and the enemies fell one after another while dancing. Asuma and Rin were very nervous. The two who had just become genin could not exert their own strength on the battlefield with hundreds of corpses, but they could still fight normally. This was already a strong psychological quality for the two newcomers. Generally speaking, it is standard to lead genin to see blood and deal with more than a dozen bandits at a time. Due to Kazuki's fighting power, Tsunade boldly chose this den of hundreds of bandits in order to simulate the battlefield situation most realistically. The effect will also be significant. After this experience, when Asuma and Rin had time to reflect, they would have already developed the mental stamina necessary to face a real war. As for Kazuki, Tsunade had to sigh that among the shinobi she knew in her life, only her second grandfather Senju Tobirama had ever given her this feeling. As gentle as the son to his own people, as ruthless as a steel knife to his enemies, and his talent is incomparably outstanding. Tsunade looked at Kazuki's profile and shook her head. She felt that there was not much she could teach him anymore. All she had left to do was to offer him a temporary shelter, allowing him to grow at his own pace. Watching the expressions of the three, Tsunade spoke slowly. Do you understand? This is the fate of a shinobi. Kill others, and then be careful not to be killed by others. Think about it. Fear, anger, and even that little bit of excitement you feel when you finish off an enemy. All of these will influence you on the battlefield. Only when you manage to remain calm after killing will you be a true shinobi. Tsunade's tone was filled with a trace of uncontrollable sadness. She was indifferent to the death of the enemy, but she could not forget the death of her close ones. Asuma and Rin nodded silently. At this time, a strange male voice suddenly sounded in the valley. My, it seems that the bandits in this place were in high demand. I spent a long time looking for this job, but it seems someone beat me to it. I think I'm owed an explanation. Kakuzu walked slowly towards them from the other end of the valley, following the trail of corpses until he stopped a short distance away from Kazuki and the others. When Kakuzu looked at Kazuki and others, he was stunned, and then his pupils shrank suddenly. What did he see? The son of the Hokage, wandering the world alone. A young Uchiha with a considerable level of chakra, probably with the Sharingan activated. They were very valuable prey. Although the bandits had escaped him, it seemed that he had stumbled upon pure gold. In recent times, with the apparent peace that reigned in the shinobi world, Kakuzu had not received any major jobs from the black market, which led to a kind of stagnation in his career. But since Shimura Danzo was confined, some orders from the Land of Fire were leaked to the black market, and these lucrative commissions were all taken by the bold and skilled Kakuzu, such as the bandits in this valley. Other missing nin might not dare to enter the territory of the Land of Fire to suppress bandits, but Kakuzu was not worried about this. In order to complete the performance he set for himself, even the elite shinobi of the route were just extra income for him. When Kakuzu saw Tsunade, his eyes narrowed briefly but were soon replaced by a smile. With a low voice, he said, "Oh, what good luck, there is still a big fat sheep." Although the information about Tsunade's hematophobia was highly confidential and theoretically should not have been leaked, in recent years, with her retirement from missions, there had been much suspicion in the shinobi world. And black market analysis suggested that Tsunade, who spent her days in casinos and bars, had probably lost her ability to fight. And even if Tsunade was in her prime, Kakuzu didn't believe this so-called Sannin was a match for him. After all, he had fought the god of shinobi himself, and survived. Seeing Kakuzu, Tsunade's heart skipped a beat, muttering to herself, "The immortal Kakuzu, what is he doing here?" As one of the most feared bounty hunters in the shinobi world, Kakuzu had a well-earned reputation. An S-rank ninja with no loyalties, no ties, who killed only for money, was a formidable threat to any village. Tsunade obviously knows Kakuzu, and she knows that she can't deal with this enemy in her current state. "Kakuzu, this is a misunderstanding," Tsunade said, as she gestured for Asuma and Rin to back off with a look. Her voice tried to sound calm. "As you can see, I'm leading a team to clear this bandit camp. I had no intention of interfering with your work." Kakuzu laughed coldly. "So you're going to compensate me? How much can you pay me?" Tsunade's eyebrows jumped. So domineering? But considering her own state, Tsunade still suppressed her anger and said, "Okay, tell me a number." Looks like you've given yourself away." Kakuzu's low laughter echoed in the valley, which seemed particularly creepy and depressing. "Your negotiation experience is really as immature as a child, Tsunade. There have been speculations in the black market that you can no longer fight like a shinobi. Your concessions and retreats just now show that the information is true." Kazuki glanced at Tsunade, whose face changed drastically and was happy in his heart. Such was Tsunade's negotiation skills. In another timeline, during Pain's invasion, Nagato, who had no plans to destroy Konoha, was enraged by Tsunade's words, leading to the complete annihilation of Konoha. A prime example of how to enrage the enemy with the wrong words. "I have been in contact with the root. The reputation of your Konoha is so bad that I don't want to do business with you." Kakuzu raised 3 fingers. "Today is my lucky day. The Hokage's son, a brat from the Uchiha clan, and Sarutobi Hiruzen's apprentice. Taking their bodies to the black market will secure me profits for the next 3 years." Noera Rin, who was beside Kazuki, was not taken seriously by Kakuzu. Kazuki looked at Kakuzu, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. If this situation continued, it seemed that a famous scene would appear. The image of Tobirama sacrificing himself so that Hiruzen and the others could escape came to mind. The only one capable of fighting defending the weakest. Tsunade wanted to say something, trying to have a final negotiation with Kakuzu. But Kakuzu's actions had already revealed his answer. A hideous black monster suddenly flashed from the side of the valley and opened the big mouth behind the mask. A gust of extremely fierce wind swept the earth and roared towards Kazuki and others. Wind release, pressure damage. It seems that the black monster does not need to make hand seals to release ninjutsu. In this ambush, neither Asuma nor Rin, who were still feeling sick from having killed, could react in time. They could only watch helplessly as the hurricane approached. Kazuki squinted his eyes and watched the wind release. When the hurricane was about to swallow Asuma and Rin, he lifted them up and seemed to dodge the attack with difficulty. It seemed that Kazuki was also shocked by Kakuzu's momentum, and just barely reacted. From afar, Kakuzu's eyes exuded a mixture of coldness, greed, and bloodlust. This wind release attack was not a simple test. Kakuzu had poured in a considerable amount of chakra from the start. Damn, why is it so strong? Asuma cursed in fury and terror, clenching his fists helplessly after having narrowly escaped death. At this moment, both Asuma and Rin were covered in cuts caused by the sharp gusts of the gale. If it weren't for Kazuki, Kakuzu's attack would have already turned them into corpses, ready to collect a bounty. Tsunade was also unable to avoid it completely, and her face was scratched by the wind release, and a little blood flowed out. After a long period of slackness and the pressure in her heart, Tsunade's combat status as a kunoichi has fallen to the bottom. Tsunade-sensei. What do we do now? Asuma turned to look at Tsunade, but he was stunned. Tsunade looked even more helpless than he did. She was visibly shaking, her gaze focused on the blood on her hands, on Asuma and Rin's wounds, and on the bloodstains covering their bodies. The bright red blood awakened the tragic memories in her mind and instantly devoured her reason. This was an illusion more powerful than the Sharingan, which directly shattered Tsunade's defenses. In a trance, Tsunade seemed to see the bodies of Kazuki, Asuma, and Rin. In the illusion, Kazuki was like her younger brother, who once brought her warmth with his smile, but the dead body had even his internal organs emptied. Tsunade had lost control of her thoughts. She even began to imagine that if Kazuki fell into Kakuzu's hands, he wouldn't even have a whole corpse to bury. An Uchiha was like a living treasure. Every part of his body could be sold for a fortune on the black market, and the Sharingan, especially, was invaluable. How could Kakuzu let Kazuki go? But the more she thought about it, the more serious Tsunade's hemophobia became, so that her whole body trembled, and she couldn't even stand steadily. Kakuzu looked at Tsunade's reaction with surprise, as if he had seen a large number of gold coins waving at him. At first, he thought Tsunade could hold out a little longer, but seeing her like this, she seemed even weaker than Asuma and Rin. At least, these two people can still hold the kunai in their hands. Tsunade-sensei. What's wrong with you? Asuma shouted, completely disoriented at seeing Tsunade like that. A feeling of panic washed over him. Tsunade, who should be their greatest strength, had suddenly collapsed like this. If she continued like this, weren't they all doomed? In Asuma's mind, Kazuki was an unparalleled genius, that was without a doubt. But Kakuzu, he seemed to be on the same level as Tsunade, or even slightly above. The wind release he had just witnessed could not be described in words. There was no way Kazuki could face Kakuzu alone. Kakuzu watched coldly as Tsunade's team panicked, and he took advantage of that opportunity without mercy. Fire release, intelligent hard work. An ocean of flames engulfed the mountain, as the burning fire approached, roaring endlessly. At that moment, the kunai Asuma was holding fell to the ground, producing a clear sound, and his heart sank along with it. That day, he had not only witnessed the brutality of the battlefield, but he had also learned beforehand what the true power of a Kaga-level shinobi meant when he took a battle seriously. Asuma was stunned, Noera Rin was powerless, and Tsunade was deeply trapped in her inner fear. The three seemed to have given up, and just watched the fire getting closer and closer. Kazuki looked at the scene calmly and stepped forward. Water release, water formation wall. The wall of water and the fierce fire collided violently, and a dense mist began to churn in the air. Kazuki! Asuma shouted happily, seeing Kazuki's figure in front of him. His body, which was unable to move due to nervousness, seemed to wake up at this moment. Kazuki ignored Asuma and quickly formed a seal. Hiding in mist technique. In an instant, a thick fog covered the valley, leaving everything plunged into a blinding white. Run, Asuma! Kazuki turned around abruptly, the red light of the Sharingan looming in the mist, and his tone was extremely serious. The enemy's chakra is extremely powerful. This is not an opponent we can deal with. Immediately, Kazuki took a step and picked up the trembling Tsunade from the ground and said in a deep voice, "The hiding in mist technique can only delay him for a moment. We have to prepare to escape. Come on, you and Rin run first. I will be responsible for your retreat." Asuma stared at Kazuki blankly, and the whole person seemed to have lost his soul. The same is true for Noera Rin. This short change made her unable to adapt for a while. For the two genin, encountering a murderous Kage-level enemy in the first battle out of the village is a bit too exciting. "What are you waiting for, Death?" Kazuki spoke with uncommon severity. They can't take Tsunade-sensei, and they can't stop the enemy either. Every second they waste means one less chance to escape. Run now. We'll meet up later in the pine forest. Finally, under Kazuki's rebuke, Asuma and Noera Rin moved, desperately driving their stiff bodies to run out of the valley. Meanwhile, Tsunade, in Kazuki's arms, slowly began to regain consciousness. The trembling in her body gradually decreased, although she still could not regain her normal state. A feeling of helplessness and shame flooded Tsunade's heart. Until a moment ago, she had thought of protecting her talented student, but now it had become a burden. Wind release, pressure damage. A terrifying gust of wind blew forth again. The mist that filled the valley dissipated in an instant under the force of the wind. Kakuzu's dark green eyes shone with a sinister light, fixed on Kazuki like a vulture's. He smiled cruelly. "Brat, you Tsunade, and the Hokage's son won't be able to escape. Together, you are worth approximately 100 million ryo. I won't let you go so easily." Kakuzu extended his arm with tremendous strength, launching his fist towards Kazuki as if it were a cannon. Kazuki dodged the blow with precision, lifting Tsunade onto his shoulder as his Sharingan glowed. With a quick swing of his sword, he cut through the black ropes binding Kakuzu's fist. Kakuzu looked at the three tomo spinning in Kazuki's eyes and was slightly stunned. But soon, Kakuzu was filled with intense excitement. If Kazuki showed a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan, then Kakuzu would consider himself unlucky today. It would be hard to say what the result would be if he fought with the Uchiha madman who opened the Mangekyo. The Uchiha with Mangekyo could go to unthinkable extremes, regardless of personal damage, in order to finish off their opponents. But with only a three-tomo Sharingan, Kakuzu felt no fear. In fact, he was more determined than ever to hunt down Kazuki. Kazuki glanced at Kakuzu coldly, and the power of his pupils was released towards him at this moment. Kakuzu snorted coldly, formed seals with his hands, and the black lines in his body surged, conducting the chakra in his body in an extremely chaotic manner. For a monster physique like him, the mechanism of genjutsu interfering with the flow of chakra is ineffective for him, unless the level of pupil power or the level of the genjutsu caster is much higher than his. However, what Kakuzu didn't expect was that Kazuki was only pretending to attack. Instead of using his ocular power, he turned on his heel and, carrying Tsunade, fled at an impressive, almost ghostly speed, despite carrying another person. "Cunning brat." Kakuzu cursed, condensed chakra under his feet, and chased after him fiercely. But on the way of his pursuit, Kazuki released mist from time to time, delaying his steps. Kakuzu became more and more angry, and more calm. If this brat wants to escape with Tsunade, and is determined to run to the center of the land of fire, I may not be able to catch up with him. Kakuzu blew away the mist in front of him again with his wind release and sneered. But the remaining two brats are not capable, and one of them is the son of the Hokage. I don't believe that an Uchiha dares to abandon the child of the Hokage and return to the village. It would be better for me to kill him. Kakuzu, who had been betrayed by the top leaders of Takigakure, deeply understood what kind of faces these top leaders of the hidden village had. Maybe some are kind, some are vicious, and some look ordinary, but when it comes to their interests, they are several times more vicious than him, a bounty hunter. Although Kazuki objectively has the ability to escape, in the eyes of Kakuzu, an old man, Asuma is like a chain that ties him tightly and makes him lose the chance of survival. Unless Kazuki immediately became a traitor and cut off all ties with his family and village. But in Kakuzu's opinion, Kazuki, who could come out to cover the rear, would not do such a thing. Thinking of this, Kakuzu relaxed his mind, located Kazuki's position, and chased after him at a steady speed. What does it matter if Kazuki runs faster? He will eventually meet up with Asuma and Noera Rin. By then, Kakuzu will not give Kazuki a chance to escape. In the pine forest, Asuma and Noera Rin were panting. The nervousness and running consumed their physical strength. The sweat mixed with blood flowed down their faces, and they looked extremely embarrassed. Before they could rest in the pine forest for a while, Kazuki rushed over with Tsunade in his arms, frowned, and whispered softly, "It's troublesome. The enemy's speed is faster than I thought. At this speed, we can't get rid of the enemy." Tsunade moved in Kazuki's arms, patted Kazuki's arm gently, and signaled to put her down. Kazuki is right. The enemy is the most feared bounty hunter in the shinobi world, Kakuzu, known as the Immortal Ninja. He is said to have the power of a Kage level and has survived since the Sengoku period. He is an extremely strong and mysterious ninja. Tsunade seemed to have recovered a little. She pursed her lips and said in a deep voice, "Asuma Rin, although your speed is considered top among the genin, it is still too slow to deal with such an enemy. Kazuki, take Asuma and Rin with you and escape. I'll try to summon Katsuyu to stop him." Tsunade stood up tremblingly, but in Kazuki's Sharingan, the chakra in her body was extremely disordered, and she did not have the conditions for her usual use of chakra-enhanced strength. Even if she managed to summon Katsuyu, Kakuzu would only need to shed some blood in front of her to win the battle. Tsunade actually understood this truth. But what can be done? No matter how talented Kazuki is, he can't resist an old monster of Kage level. Asuma and Rin are just a burden. Rin looked at Tsunade worriedly. As a medical nin, she knew very well that Tsunade suffered from a serious psychological illness that prevented her from fighting. Asuma also looked at Tsunade worriedly. Tsunade smiled reluctantly and was about to say something to Kazuki, who was frowning, but her pupils suddenly dilated. Kazuki slowly cut open his finger with Muramasa and placed the red finger in front of Tsunade. Staring at the blood red, Tsunade suffocated again and shook all over. Asuma looked at Kazuki in amazement, and Rin also had a shocked expression. Kazuki shook his head slowly and sighed heavily. In this state, letting Tsunade-sensei fight against Kakuzu, isn't it sending her to her death? Asuma was stunned for a moment, and after understanding, he nodded heavily. What Kazuki said was right, but there was another problem that urgently needed to be solved. What were they supposed to do in this situation? Tsunade couldn't fight, Kazuki was no match for Kakuzu, and both he and Rin were just a burden. Were they really destined to die there? At that moment, at the edge of the pine forest, a fire began to rise that seemed to set even the clouds in the sky on fire. Asuma's pupils shrank suddenly, and he murmured, "He's found us. He's burning down the forest to catch us." But Kazuki, instead of being alarmed, smiled as if he had suddenly understood something. He called everyone and spoke calmly. "The situation is very simple now. Asuma, Rin, Tsunade-sensei, we must have one person stay as the bait, and delay time for the others as much as possible. Otherwise, we will all die here. So now there is only one last question. Who will be this person?" Kazuki glanced at his companions present. Noera Rin was at a loss, not to mention whether he had the courage. But what could she do? The same was true for Asuma. He was willing to cover for Kazuki. But the question was, would his covering be meaningful and valuable? Tsunade was silent, too. The blood on Kazuki's finger could defeat her fighting spirit. Asuma, Rin, Tsunade-sensei, this candidate can only be me, no need to argue. Kazuki even laughed and said slowly, "Today I will practice the will of fire." Asuma hurriedly shouted, "Kazuki, this is too dangerous, there must be other ways." However, when Kazuki looked at him, Asuma immediately fell silent. What alternative could he propose? Stay with Kazuki? This is certainly feasible. But, seeing Kazuki's firm gaze, Asuma felt a tremor in his hands. His mouth filled with sticky saliva that sealed his lips like glue. He couldn't say anything. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion. He hated himself for his cowardice. But then he saw Kazuki stand up. Asuma stared at him, taking in his determined profile, completely lost for a moment. "No, Kazuki, I want to stay with you." Asuma stood up suddenly, as if he was out of control, and shouted at the top of his lungs. Kazuki's eyes suddenly became stern, staring at Asuma. "Asuma, look inside yourself first and stay calm. If you continue acting like this, you will only endanger your comrades. At your current age and strength, it is not your time to make this kind of sacrifice. That day will come, but not today. Before that, keep your life and remember the agreement between you and me." Kazuki's words seemed to have an invisible power, which instantly fixed Asuma in place. "If I can't come back, Asuma, then you must remain dormant and continue to observe. Find those shinobi who truly have the will of fire in their hearts, and let yourself and them become people who can be entrusted and build a new era. Asuma's tears welled up in his eyes. From the target Sarutobi Asuma, you get an unbreakable bond, Asuma. Unbreakable bond, Asuma. Your actions have left a deep impression on Asuma, creating a bond that is unique in the world. He will always be inclined to side with you in his decisions. Kazuki wiped the blood off his fingertips, turned to look at Tsunade, and said with a smile, "Tsunade-sensei, you should drink less alcohol and more hen soup in the future. Take care of your body, and if it is convenient, help me take care of Shisui, he is still very young. By the way, please remember to help Asuma, he is the true inheritor of the will of fire." Tsunade was motionless, staring at Kazuki, as if to engrave this scene in her heart. A strong feeling of appreciation has been detected from Tsunade towards the host. A bond has been established. A strong feeling of appreciation has been detected from Noera Rin towards the host. A bond has been established. Okay, I've said what I should say. Kazuki put away his smile, waved his hand suddenly, and shouted to the members of Tsunade's team, "Don't look back, run." Asuma stood up, gritting his teeth, while Rin and Tsunade watched Kazuki's back as he turned around. Everyone felt an emptiness in their hearts, but his words pushed them forward. Kazuki had already made the greatest sacrifice possible. If they hesitated any longer and squandered this precious opportunity, they would never forgive themselves. The fire in the forest became more and more fierce, and Kakuzu's chakra gradually approached Kazuki's position at this moment. And Tobirama, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke at this time. "Kazuki, you..." "Tobirama, you forgot to call me little brat." "If you don't, it doesn't sound right to me," Kazuki replied with a smile, as he unsheathed his Muramasa sword, looking at Kakuzu's silhouette among the flames. "Why was what I said wrong just now? You who got a 0 on the Will of Fire test, are you going to teach me, who got a perfect score, something?" Tobirama was silent for a moment, but laughed. "No, today you have earned a perfect score. As a reward, I can lend you my power." "No, I don't need it." Kazuki smiled slightly, rejecting Tobirama's offer with a joking but firm tone, and said seriously, "My decision to cover the rear is because of the Will of Fire. If I use your power, wouldn't it be a betrayal of what I just said? I want to experience what it truly means to practice the Will of Fire, sacrificing myself for my comrades. Even if there is a risk of death, I will accept it." Senju Tobirama frowned. He didn't expect Kazuki to reject his power. Besides, why did this kid start talking nonsense? "Tobirama, tell me, if I really die, will Tsunade's hemophobia get better? Asuma's Will of Fire may burn brightly because of my death, and become a good Hokage." Kazuki scoffed at himself with a carefree smile, but Tobirama couldn't help but frown even deeper, his thoughts churning. Damn UCHIHA Izuna. His chakra is affecting Kazuki. Otherwise, Kazuki would never reject my power or lock himself into these absurd ideas like a stubborn Uchiha. The Will of Fire is flexible. It seems that I need to find an opportunity to teach Kazuki how to adapt. At the critical moment, even if this kid doesn't want my power, I'll make sure he gets it. After Kakuzu appeared, Tobirama remained silent, carefully observing Kazuki's every move in the midst of the crisis. Only in these critical moments is a person's true character revealed. So far, Kazuki had impressed Tobirama, and the words he exchanged with Asuma as they parted made him show a smile. Who does Kazuki look like? 100% like him. The calm posture, the sharp thinking, the words that encouraged his companions, and that ironclad will of fire. It was almost identical to how he himself had covered the retreat for Hiruzen, Danzo, and the others in their youth. Even the words were almost the same. The youngest son of the monkey family was stunned by what Kazuki said, which reminded Tobirama of Hiruzen and Danzo when they were young. They were brave, but also fearful. However, one could not expect too much from a young man in such a critical situation. The only regret is that Kazuki rejected his power, which made Senju Tobirama feel a little uncomfortable. It's quite strange. If Kazuki had used him as a trump card from the beginning and asked for his power when he met Kakuzu, then Senju Tobirama would have felt that Kazuki's mind was not pure, and the words just now might be to buy people's hearts with his power. But when faced with Kakuzu, Kazuki never once asked for his help. Even when Tobirama offered, he was firmly rejected. This made Tobirama wonder, is Kazuki's will of fire too pure, or is Uchiha Izuna's chakra already starting to influence him? Either way, After listening to Kazuki's speech, Tobirama made a decision. If Kazuki ever wants to use his power, as long as he doesn't endanger Konoha, even if he acts somewhat arrogantly, Tobirama would allow it. And if Kazuki was ever in danger, Tobirama planned to tell him, "This power, whether you want it or not, you will use it." Kakuzu walked over, looking at Kazuki, who was holding Muramasa with a calm expression. He coldly commented, "Little one, you've been left behind like a disposable pawn. A son of the Hokage, the student of the Hokage. Even though you are a ninja from a powerful clan like the Uchiha, you are now nothing more than his meat shield to slow me down a bit. But don't worry, I'll take care of killing them all. I won't let you make this journey alone." Black threads emerged from Kakuzu's body, concentrating overwhelming chakra. Lightning release, false darkness. Bursts of lightning descended like a storm, shattering rows of pine trees in their wake. Kazuki's figure moved like a specter, dodging the attacks with precision. At breakneck speed, with Muramasa in hand, he charged straight towards Kakuzu. Kakuzu stared at the katana in Kazuki's hand and sneered. An Uchiha who is good at close combat. For Kakuzu, this was a classic Uchiha strategy. But Kakuzu was not afraid. Any physical attack was ineffective for him. Her green eyes stared directly at Kazuki's three tomo, while the black threads fluttered, trying to capture his figure. But Kazuki was moving too fast, and the clumsy black lines couldn't keep up with him. With the blessing of the body flicker technique, Kazuki's speed became increasingly faster, and Muramasa slashed Kakuzu at tricky angles. Kakuzu raised his arm, hardening it until it turned black, stopping Muramasa's blade with his bare hands. Earth release, earth spear. The clash of the sword and the hardened arm resonated with a metallic sound. "Physical attacks are ineffective against me, kid," Kakuzu said with a smirk, trying to catch the sword. But Kazuki was faster, withdrawing the blade just in time and reappearing behind Kakuzu. Kakuzu didn't flinch. He didn't turn around, but a cruel smile appeared on his face. He deliberately exposed his back to Kazuki. His hardening technique covered his entire body, not just his arms. If Kazuki attacked his back, the sword would bounce off, and the masked monsters would ambush him from the sides. And so the fight would end. "Kazuki, your earth spear technique can harden your entire body, not just your arms." Senju Tobirama said quickly, "Use lightning release to break it or try the hard whirlpool water blade." But Kazuki didn't seem to hear him, continuing to brandish the Muramasa sword. However, this was no ordinary slash. A large amount of chakra was wrapped around Kazuki's arm, and the chakra-enhanced strength was released to the extreme at this moment, along with the blade of the Muramasa sword that was covered in a fierce flame. But in an instant, those overflowing flames were intensely compressed, condensing on the blade of the sword. The imposing blade of the Muramasa sword, at that moment, harbored a terrifyingly high temperature. If Kazuki had not mastered Uchiha Izuna's Kenjutsu and was proficient in Uchiha Madara's fire release techniques, it would have been difficult to reach this level. This was a manifestation of the ultimate mastery of Kenjutsu and fire release. Senju Tobirama's heart sank. Kazuki did not use his water release, but used Uchiha Izuna's moves, and even upgraded them. Swish. When Muramasa's blade collided with Kakuzu's back, the body, which was originally as hard as a rock, was cut open by the extremely high temperature and huge force. The severe pain in his back made Kakuzu scream instantly. Kazuki, with a cold expression, applied even more pressure, causing Muramasa to completely pierce through Kakuzu's body. The sword was embedded in Kakuzu's body, and the scorching heat burned his flesh. Even the black threads wrapped around him began to melt. But Kazuki wasn't satisfied with that strike. With his chakra enveloping his foot, he kicked out and sent Kakuzu's body flying away from Muramasa's blade. Kakuzu has been detected to feel intense hatred towards the host. The target has been linked. Kazuki chuckled. He knew that Kakuzu was extremely angry at the moment, but Kakuzu pretended to be a dead man and lay quietly on the ground without moving. Is this trying to trick him? Kazuki clapped his hands slowly, with a smile on his lips. Do you want to continue lying down? If it's later, my companions will have to go back to the village for dinner. As a bounty hunter, I think you still need to strengthen your professional attitude and focus on efficiency. From the target Kakuzu, you gain the mastery of Earth attribute chakra properties. From the target Kakuzu, you gain Earth release, Earth spear. Kakuzu's body trembled noticeably, and countless black lines surged from his body and burst out. 5 creatures with different colored masks quickly emerged from a hidden spot, placing themselves around Kakuzu to protect him. One of them, wearing an Earth attribute mask, collapsed on the road, his mask cracked in two. Meanwhile, the other 4 monsters connected their black threads to the wound on Kakuzu's back, beginning to repair it. "Kid, you really pissed me off. That's my precious Earth release heart." Kakuzu slowly stood up with anger on his face, not taking his eyes off Kazuki and his sword Muramasa. "I'm not planning on selling your heart on the black market anymore. I want it for myself." Kakuzu let out a scream of fury as the 4 remaining monsters returned to his body. Black threads began to violently sprout from his joints, mouth, and back. 8 thick black threads formed a sort of barrier that snaked around his body. The wind and fire masks manifested on his shoulders, while the lightning and water masks covered his left arm. At this moment, the enraged Kakuzu used all his strength. He wanted to kill Kazuki, who destroyed his Earth release heart, and he had to hurry to arrest Tsunade and Asuma, who were running farther and farther away. Every second that passed meant millions of Ryo moving further away from him. Just as the battle reached its climax, Uchiha Madara, who had decided to return to reality to prevent Tobirama's thoughts and techniques from poisoning Kazuki, couldn't resist. Loneliness overcame him and he turned on his white Zetsu television once more, searching for some program about Kazuki. Just a glance. Just a quick one. Madara said to himself before frowning. Huh? Not in the ninja school, not in the Uchiha clan, not even in Konoha, then where? Uchiha Madara sighed. This is the child who has grown up and his heart is wild. He quickly formed some seals and through the white Zetsu information network that covered the shinobi world, he began to search in detail. Found it, this white Zetsu sensed Kazuki's chakra. However, when the scene captured by white Zetsu appeared before Madara's eyes, his normally ice-cold heart shuddered. Kazuki didn't look like Tobirama this time. What Madara saw was Kazuki using the Sharingan and employing fire release and Kenjutsu techniques with a precision worthy of an Uchiha, cutting open Kakuzu's body. But now the question Uchiha Madara is thinking about is how Kazuki fought with such a monster. This is too dangerous. Uchiha Madara stood up suddenly and ordered the white Zetsu in the connection with the spell. All white Zetsu near the border of the Land of Fire, give up your surveillance targets now and reinforce Kazuki at all costs. When necessary, you can expose your existence, but there is only one thing, you must ensure Kazuki's safety. At this moment, near the border of the Land of Fire, thousands of white Zetsu were advancing on the land, rushing madly towards Kazuki's direction. Uchiha Madara stared at the scene. He wanted to rush over in person. Uchiha Madara watched intently as Kazuki faced Kakuzu, while comforting himself in his mind. Nearly 1,000 white Zetsu are a very powerful force. Although the combat intelligence of the white Zetsu was generally low, even the most mediocre ones had capabilities close to that of a special jonin. In addition, they were innate masters of annoying techniques such as the mayfly. Some special white Zetsu also master some wood-release techniques, and their combat power is even more considerable. Therefore, as long as the white Zetsu support in time, even if there is an accident in the battle between Kazuki and Kakuzu, it will not endanger his life. However, despite this, Uchiha Madara's gaze remained serious and conflicted. It was a mix of conflicting emotions. Uchiha Madara didn't want to see Kazuki get hurt and hoped that his new brother would show the proud talent of the Uchiha clan and stop using the low-level water release techniques of Senju Tobirama. He was also worried that Kazuki was growing up too fast. As an old man approaching 100 years old, Uchiha Madara understood a truth. Blood is only a starting point for the emotions between people, and the things they have experienced together are the key to determining the final height of the relationship. It's not that Kazuki is the reincarnation of Izuna's chakra, and he will call him brother when he sees him. The reason why Uchiha Izuna is his favorite brother is partly due to blood, but the most important thing is the experience of the two people relying on each other in the Sengoku period. If Madara wanted Kazuki to be the spokesperson for the Eye of the Moon plan, he had to make him fall into his game, giving him enough time to influence him and reshape his thinking. But here was the problem. The so-called layout depends on the strategy and force of both sides. In Madara's opinion, although Izuna was the true leader of the Uchiha in his time, that only happened because he, as the older brother, gave in. But that didn't mean his wisdom was inferior. Being the eldest brother, Madara naturally considered himself superior in every aspect. But objectively speaking, Madara believes that although he is better than Izuna in terms of wisdom, the difference was not that great. Overall, they were almost on par. Therefore, for Kazuki to fall into his game, the key would be power. But Kazuki's strength is getting stronger and stronger, and his talent is so good that even Uchiha Madara is surprised. If he decided to intervene now, although Kazuki seemed more passionate than Obito, but there was a calmness within him that made Madara unable to see that Kazuki had the potential to turn evil. He does not think that Kazuki has the kind of people and things that cannot be separated, and rashly acting will only make him notice abnormalities. Madara sighed. Winning over such a talented and intelligent brother was much more difficult than dealing with a simple Obito. He couldn't find a suitable entry point. He could only put his worries aside for the time being and look carefully. Kid, it's been a long time since anyone could make me so angry. 8 thick black lines like giant pythons were tumbling in the air. Kakuzu's eyes were full of cold, murderous intent. Seeing your forehead protector reminded me of some past events. The Konoha shinobi I fought for the first time, the first Hokage. After Kakuzu finished speaking, he stared at Kazuki's expression, as if trying to find a look of shock in it. Kakuzu used this trick many times, and he always managed to stagger his opponents, revealing an opening. But Kazuki simply smiled, took out a shuriken and casually threw it towards him. Kakuzu didn't dodge, and the swirling black line knocked down the shuriken in the air. But he didn't understand why Kazuki would make such a boring test with his strength. What's the meaning of this shuriken? Kazuki, with a mocking expression, looked at Kakuzu and said slowly, "Is this how your fight with the first Hokage went? Hiding in the crowd several kilometers away and throwing a shuriken, then bragging for decades that you fought him." Kakuzu was stunned for a moment. The veins on his forehead began to throb, and his voice trembled with anger. Damn child with a poisonous tongue. This underestimated him too much. Back then, Kakuzu fought with a wooden clone of Hashirama for several rounds, but he realized that the situation was not good and quickly slipped away. Just tell me if this was a fight. From target Kakuzu you get lightning release, false darkness. Kazuki was a little surprised. He originally just wanted to play a joke, but judging from the reward, Kakuzu seemed to care about this matter. Suddenly, Kakuzu attacked ferociously. From his shoulders, the masks representing fire and wind opened, releasing a devastating torrent of flames and hurricane-force winds that rushed towards Kazuki. Kazuki frowned and looked at the power of this ninjutsu and couldn't help but secretly admired it. Although he had joked about Kakuzu, he couldn't deny that his power was impressive. The vast combat experience, the large amount of chakra, his mastery of multiple ninjutsu and the immortality that made him almost invulnerable. Kazuki quickly formed a seal. Earth release, underground projection fish technique. In an instant, Kazuki dove underground, disappearing. Meanwhile, the white Zetsu army that was hiding underground was stunned. Kazuki moved underground, causing the white Zetsu to flee in fear of being discovered. However, the fleeting white on the ground caught Kazuki's attention. Kazuki's eyes flickered. The firestorm continued to rage across the ground, with heat seeping even underground. Kazuki formed some hand seals, and a shield of water covered him, protecting him from the heat. Kakuzu looked at the scorched earth, searching for Kazuki with his eyes. Behind him, Kazuki slowly emerged from the ground and said softly, "Kakuzu, you should stop using those fake stories. Look, even your ninjutsu can't hit anyone anymore after you're discovered. A shinobi with a little knowledge won't believe your nonsense. In this world, the only one who can fight the first Hokage and survive is Uchiha Madara." Kakuzu turned around suddenly and said coldly, "You are ignorant. Even Uchiha Madara was killed by the first Hokage, but I am still alive." Kazuki shook his head slightly and sighed. Who can kill Uchiha Madara? Rather than saying that he lost to Senju Hashirama, it is better to say that he just lost to himself. Kakuzu looked at Kazuki suspiciously. Why did he suddenly start talking to him about Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama? In fact, Kazuki's words were not meant for him, but for the old man who can give gifts. As soon as Kazuki finished speaking, a notification resounded in his mind. From the target Uchiha Madara you obtain mastery in Uchiha Taijutsu. Uchiha Madara, who was sitting in front of the white Zetsu TV, heard Kazuki's words and smiled pleased. He was indeed the reincarnation of his younger brother. Even though they had never met, he was on his side. The Shura of the shinobi world would not lose to others, but only to himself. Uchiha Madara felt so comfortable after hearing this that he didn't even bother to care about Kakuzu's rude words. "Kid, Don't talk about those people you will never meet in your lifetime. Kakuzu interrupted abruptly, as his chakra began to swirl. Masks with the elements of wind, lightning, and fire moved over his left arm, forming a fearsome cannon. Earth Grudge Fear, final shot. The hurricane, fire, and thunder merged into one, and the three extremely powerful chakras were mixed into a high-level composite ninjutsu. The terrifying light wave roared towards Kazuki in an instant, flattening all obstacles in front of it. Kakuzu fixed his eyes on Kazuki's figure, controlling the trajectory of the attack. If Kazuki tried to escape underground, Kakuzu had already decided to raise the ground to force him out. Fighting Kazuki took up too much of his time, so Kakuzu had no confidence in whether he could catch Tsunade and others. Therefore, the only prey he could capture was Kazuki, the valuable Uchiha who had made him lose 100 million ryo. Kakuzu spared no chakra, maximizing the speed and power of the energy beam. "Kazuki, I will lend you my power," Tobirama said urgently. "This ninjutsu is too powerful. You won't be able to dodge it with your strength alone." "I know, Tobirama, but I don't need your power." Kazuki took a deep breath and exhaled a raging fire. Fire release, great fire annihilation. Senju Tobirama's pupils shrank suddenly, and he was ready to forcefully transfer power to Kazuki. Although Kazuki was a prodigy, trying to face Kakuzu was madness. Uchiha Madara saw this scene and gave an order to White Zetsu in a deep voice. "Listen to my orders and prepare to rescue Kazuki." The beam of light quickly overwhelmed the flames, but it was still delayed for an instant. Kazuki took advantage of this opportunity and rushed towards Kakuzu swiftly. Kakuzu grinned and thought to himself, "You crazy kid, you dare to charge at me." Kakuzu continued to condense chakra into the beam of light and launched it towards Kazuki fiercely. But Kazuki, undaunted, continued to use his fire release to force his way through the attack, getting closer and closer. The continuous exchange left him wounded, but in his eyes, the Sharingan glowed with a sinister intensity, as red as blood. Within him, Uchiha Madara's bloodline was awakening, unleashing overwhelming force. His chakra and eye power were growing rapidly. Under Kakuzu's watchful gaze, Kazuki, his body scarred by burns, raised his sword Muramasa, a cold smile revealing his sharp white teeth. Kakuzu tried to raise his hand to attack him. But at that distance, Kazuki was faster. His sword slashed towards Kakuzu's arm before he could react. Kakuzu understood at that moment why Kazuki had been so determined to approach him. He knew that Kakuzu's true strength lay in his long-range attacks, using his chakra and composite ninjutsu to annihilate enemies from a distance. Kazuki, seeing that he had no advantage in a ninjutsu duel, opted for hand-to-hand combat, Kakuzu's weakness. Kakuzu's earthen heart had already been destroyed, and facing Kazuki's monstrous strength and his sharp sword engulfed in flames, his body, protected by his special technique, crumbled under Kazuki's precise blows. Kazuki's sword fell again, ignoring the black lines of Kakuzu's technique that were trying to counterattack, and headed straight for his head. But Kakuzu was not willing to give up. The black lines surrounding him transformed into giant snakes that attacked Kazuki's heart directly. Kazuki did not retreat. The Sharingan in his eyes turned, and his body hardened instantly at this moment. Earth Release, Earth Spear. The defensive ninjutsu that Kakuzu relied on was used by Kazuki for the first time at this moment. Kakuzu's pupils shrank suddenly, but Muramasa's blade did not give him time to react and pierced his second heart. However, Kakuzu's black lines violently struck Kazuki's back. Uchiha Madara's heart tightened, and Senju Tobirama's eyes condensed. The minds of the two mortal enemies were now locked onto Kazuki, and they could barely contain themselves from intervening on the battlefield. On one hand, there were thousands of White Zetsu waiting for the opportunity, and even the special White Zetsu himself might come in person. On the other hand, Tobirama's chakra had long been prepared for Kazuki, and he couldn't wait to infuse it into him now. Kakuzu, in intense pain, clutched his chest, feeling again the terror of facing an Uchiha. Kazuki slowly stood up, cracking his neck, and despite his injuries, his body seemed to be brimming with energy. This is the blood of Uchiha, the talent of Uchiha Madara. The blood of the fighting clan. The fastest way to activate it is to fight on the line of life and death. If you keep indulging in a stable environment, the bloodthirsty wolf will become a dog guarding the house. The Konoha police force created by Senju Tobirama for the Uchiha clan contains this truth. You still have 3 hearts, right? Kazuki wiped the blood off his face and said arrogantly, "Get up and keep fighting." Senju Tobirama watched this scene in silence. This was really the episode he didn't want to watch the most. As he stayed behind to allow his companions to escape, Kazuki was like a replica of Tobirama. And at this moment, Kazuki seemed to be bloodthirsty, and the taste of Uchiha was so pure that it was about to overflow. Even, Senju Tobirama felt that Kazuki now was not like the calm Uchiha Izuna, but had the crazy taste of Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara's feelings were completely opposite to Senju Tobirama's. He had been worried before, thinking that Kazuki had been influenced by Tobirama, and that was why he had decided not to pay attention to him anymore. But seeing Kazuki's current appearance, Uchiha Madara smiled happily. Compared to Izuna, Uchiha Madara felt that Kazuki's figure was more like him at the moment. However, it is normal for the younger brother to be like the older brother. Uchiha Madara didn't think much about it and signaled White Zetsu to retreat first, but the smile on his face seemed to be overflowing, and he was just about to laugh up to the sky. Kakuzu slowly stood up, and his eyes were full of solemnity. "Kid, you were deliberately showing weakness to me before, letting your companions go first, and you wanted to fight me alone, right? You don't want to expose your strength." Kakuzu took a deep breath, calmed his mind, and a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. "You want to use me as your whetstone? That depends on whether you have the ability." The situation seemed to have changed. Kazuki, who was covered with scars from constantly breaking through the beam bombardment, carried Muramasa on his shoulders in a rebellious manner, changing his previous gentle appearance, like a thorough Uchiha. "There's no point in talking any further. Let's move on." Kazuki, moving like a specter, with a red glow in his eyes that stretched like a line of fire as he advanced at high speed, accurately dodged the attacks of the giant black-lined snake. Once again, he lunged towards Kakuzu. Kakuzu's eyes kept spinning, but he couldn't keep track of Kazuki's figure. Why does this kid seem to have multiple personalities? He was calmly dealing with me just now, but now he is so crazy and extreme. Isn't he afraid of death? Kakuzu cursed in his mind, with a flash of anger in his eyes, and he made up his mind. Kakuzu aimed at the midpoint between him and Kazuki and tried his best to infuse chakra into the light column. The explosion radius expanded to the extreme at this moment. Since Kazuki can't be captured, let's see whose life is tougher. Kazuki stopped his advance abruptly. In the blink of an eye, he activated the Earth Spear and a defensive water release ninjutsu to withstand the inevitable impact. Boom! When the smoke finally cleared, a new wound adorned Kakuzu's body. Another one of his hearts had been broken. In front of him, Kazuki had also been swept away by the explosion, and he was in no better condition. What was more disturbing was the glow in Kazuki's eyes. His 3 Tomo Sharingan glowed brighter, and the Tomo spun excitedly. Kazuki exhaled deeply, savoring the pain and excitement coursing through his body. With a smile, he looked at Kakuzu and said, "You still have 2 hearts, right? Let's continue. Why not take this fight to the end?" Uchiha Madara looked at this scene, and the shadow of his youth seemed to emerge in front of him. "Kazuki." Madara muttered softly, his feelings growing more complex. He could see that Kazuki's seemingly reckless fight had brought the pupil power of the Sharingan to a new level. Uchiha Madara's mind is like an old father. He wants his son to succeed and make a career, and he also wants his son to listen to him after returning home and not have too many opinions. But Senju Tobirama in Kazuki's body couldn't help it anymore and began to force his power to Kazuki. "Kid, your body has reached its limit. It will be dangerous if you continue like this. Use my power. This is my legacy, the will of fire. Are you going to reject the second Hokage of Konoha?" Tobirama's power flowed fiercely towards Kazuki. Kazuki's condition is too wrong. While transmitting power to Kazuki, Tobirama thought in his mind. Kazuki's thinking and logic were very clear just now, and he was very calm during the battle, but suddenly he seemed to be possessed by a demon. So there is only one possibility. "Uchiha Izuna, what kind of influence has your chakra left on this boy?" Tobirama searched fiercely inside Kazuki's body, searching for an invisible enemy. For Tobirama, the calm and wise Kazuki from a few moments ago had suddenly become a copy of Izuna or even Madara. There could be no other explanation than some evil chakra intervening in the process. "You're anxious because Kazuki looks like me?" Senju Tobirama's eyes gradually became fierce, and the red background in his eyes seemed to be much deeper. "It's just a chakra of a defeated opponent. You lost to me in a single fight when you were alive. Don't even think about turning the tables." Kazuki slowly felt the power of Senju Tobirama, exhaled a long breath, and his eyes flickered. The reason why Kazuki's fighting style suddenly became so extreme was certainly not because of Uchiha Izuna's chakra. He didn't have it. Of course, it would be better if he had it. Kazuki's real purpose was to try to stimulate Uchiha Madara's bloodline talent. Since Kazuki received this reward, his body has not received any obvious feedback, as if it does not exist. When fighting with Kakuzu, Kazuki, who was under pressure, felt the excitement of his body. His pupil power and chakra were rising at a speed visible to the naked eye, just like dry grass and trees seeing water, eager to fight, crazy fight. So Kazuki fought Kakuzu in the most Uchiha state and fought to the death. The effect is also significant. Uchiha Madara's bloodline needs this level of battle to activate. Kazuki's second goal is to let Uchiha Madara join the game completely. Uchiha Izuna's Kenjutsu, Uchiha Madara's fire release technique, the essence of taijutsu, and Kazuki and Izuna's very similar faces. Now there is also a bloodline inspired by Uchiha Madara himself. Look here, old man. You still think I'm not Izuna? I say I am. Kazuki thought. The more confused Madara is, the more confident Kazuki will be and the more time he will have to develop his skills. But Kazuki's wonderful performance of the little Uchiha Madara only made a mere taijutsu explode, making him a little unhappy. On this issue, both Senju Tobirama and Uchiha Madara have this trait. Even if Kazuki managed to emotionally touch them on their weak points, they still maintained their instinctive calm. As they recognized Kazuki more, their emotions stabilized and the threshold for altering their mood increased. This requires Kazuki to prepare a more exciting performance, and let their prepared hearts tremble again. Tobirama, what are you doing? Kazuki frowned and whispered, do you really think I can't defeat Kakuzu with my own power? The injuries I suffered in this battle are not just ordinary pain, but I am experiencing the true will of fire. Getting a 10 on the will of fire theory is easy, but maintaining this belief in the face of death is something I still need to continue training in. Tobirama blinked, surprised by Kazuki's attitude, who seemed possessed by the rebellious spirit of the Uchiha. The demon of the Uchiha clan, if used in the right place, seems to be a bit interesting. Tobirama, I'll tell you the truth. Kazuki sighed, looked at Senju Tobirama sincerely, and said slowly, even though I'm here to cover Tsunade-sensei and Asuma's retreat, when I face such a powerful enemy and know that my life is in danger, I feel an inexplicable emotion. I don't have that unwavering firmness they talk about. But, thinking of you, when you stayed to protect your guards, didn't you have doubts like mine? That's the difference between you and me, and it's what I want to overcome. Senju Tobirama's eyes trembled. He finally understood why Kazuki rejected his power. As Kazuki had said, everyone can talk about the will of fire, but carrying it out is what is truly difficult. Especially when faced with death, keeping that heart pure is even more complicated. In a moment of reverie, Tobirama recalled when he had tested his own disciples in a similar situation. Who would stay behind when pursued by Kinkaku and Ginkaku's troops? Sarutobi Hiruzen was decisive at that moment, but Shimura Danzo hesitated and was cowardly. So Senju Tobirama directly ordered Sarutobi Hiruzen to be the Hokage, and Shimura Danzo was completely out. And Kazuki in front of him did better than Sarutobi Hiruzen, because he had actually fought a life-and-death battle with Kakuzu, but he still felt that his will of fire was not strong enough and wanted to temper it. Senju Tobirama laughed heartily and waved his hand domineeringly. I tell you, Kazuki, even I can't face life and death completely calmly, and there will still be complicated emotions in my heart. No need to say more, your will of fire, I, Senju Tobirama, the second Hokage of Konoha, officially tell you that I acknowledge it. Senju Tobirama instantly increased the transmission of power, not caring about the stability of his soul at all, and sent all the power he could send over regardless of the consequences. He wants Kazuki to understand. In his body, there is not only the violent and out-of-control power of Uchiha Izuna, but also a wise Senju Tobirama to support him. He was not alone in his fight for the will of fire. However, at that very moment, Tobirama felt his own soul power also increase. From the target Senju Tobirama's bond. The bond of Senju Tobirama, when he provides you with power, you can temporarily break your own limit without being affected. Kazuki laughed, unconsciously. So, in the end, I've really gained Tobirama's support, huh? Kazuki nodded slowly and took a deep breath. Since you said so, Tobirama, I will take the liberty to accept it. Senju Tobirama snorted coldly out of habit, but laughed the next moment. Go, take my power and teach that bastard who said he had fought with my elder brother a lesson. Kakuzu's words not only made Uchiha Madara very unhappy, but also Senju Tobirama. What is your identity and status? Although your strength is considered okay, you're not worthy of saying that you have fought with my elder brother. Try the power of Senju Tobirama first. Kakuzu stared blankly at Kazuki, whose chakra was surging, and didn't know what happened for a moment. He was still waiting for Kazuki to continue the attack. In fact, Kakuzu had already gritted his teeth, ready to stand and face Kazuki in an explosive exchange of power. He was going to endure the bombardment of chakra beams and see who came out of it alive. After all, he still had two hearts, while Kazuki was nothing more than a mere human. But Kazuki just stood there, and the amount of his chakra skyrocketed like crazy.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.